across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device. If you do miss anything from the show, we're with you all the way until 1 o'clock. We go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking about, well, a whole range of stories. Got that G7 summit over in Europe. We've got Donald Trump apparently going to release this US-Iran deal to end the war before Friday. That's what J.D. Vance is saying. But we've got the Iranians saying they're going to charge a toll for oil tankers and other shipping to get through the Strait of Hormuz. Americans say that's not the case. Israel saying we're not going to remove our military from Lebanon while Hezbollah is still a threat. Is this really a peace deal? And are we going to be any better off at the end of it than we were before? And perhaps, possibly, worse off. Plus, we're also going to be talking about this bizarre story involving Keir Starmer and his homes and his family home and his car being the subject of 3 arson attacks, which the BBC has revealed as part of a sabotage campaign by the Russian state. Now, I know you've all been looking at the rumours online. Everyone else is playing along with them. This idea that this is Russian rent boys, Ukrainian rent boys. That rumour's been going around for a long time. And guess who's pushing that? That is the Russians. Well, well played, carrying on with that. One of the people still pushing it, even yesterday, recently been in Moscow, of course, is one Tommy Robinson, a.k.a. Stephen Liaxi Lennon, so I wouldn't be surprised by that from him. But just a very strange state of affairs. We'll talk about that. We're also going to be talking more about that social media ban, criticised as a rush job for under 16-year-olds. Elon Musk has said quite simply, the UK is a police state. Lots to talk about, including, as we've just been talking about with JK, that just horrific case of the teacher and his boyfriend who adopted a baby and then sexually abused him, basically to death. Yeah, prison's too good for them. I think we can all agree on that, if you can even bear to read any of the details, which I have to say I've struggled with. Lots to say, to talk about. Delighted to say that joining me throughout the show today is Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. A very good morning to you. We're asking today about, well, people can get in touch, as they always know, on any topic they so choose. But in particular, going to be asking about Russia being revealed to be behind these arson attacks targeting Keir Starmer's home and car. What is your reaction to that? I mean, do you believe this? Why would they be targeting? Why hasn't the Prime Minister issued a statement on this? Of course, things had to be kept relatively quiet because there was actually a court case that ended yesterday. We announced on the show yesterday the guilty verdicts for 2 of the men in that case. Give us a call. Let us know your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. You can text us on 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged the national rate and text cost 1 standard network rate message. Let us know your thoughts on the G7 and this Iran-US deal, and also, the Prime Minister generally just prancing around on the world stage trying to play the big I am. Oh, we're intercepting tankers. We're doing this. We're doing that. Social media ban. Oh, yeah. Mr. Action Man. Well, where have you been for the last best part of 2 years, mate? Not getting very much done at all. Is it going to save his skin? I think we all know that's rather unlikely, don't we? This is a man who's desperately trying to sort of do something to survive as Prime Minister. But again, also going to be talking about the announcements from various opposition parties as well. Tom Slater, as I say, editor of Spiked Online. First of all, this US-Iran deal, I mean, as far as I can tell, the best case scenario is it takes us back to where we were before February the 28th, when we first saw Israeli and American bombing of Iran. And worst case scenario, in a worse state, where we've got tolls on shipping, setting a terrible precedent, because this is not the case, unless it's, Panama Canal, something's been built for you to get through, to save going all the way around South America. That is a terrible precedent and a massive fail by the Americans if Iran does instigate those tolls, as they said they plan to do after a 60-day ceasefire for debate and conversation. But also, carrying on, keeping their enriched uranium and stuff. I mean, this is an abject fail by Donald Trump, isn't it? You can't describe it as anything else.
I don't think you can describe it as anything else, particularly because of the fact that this is being hailed as a peace deal. First of all, it's not really a peace deal. It's a cessation of hostilities that gives them 60 days to hammer out something potentially more permanent. And as you say, it'd be one thing if the US and Israel had expended all of this blood and treasure to, or more treasure than blood, shall we say, to the end of a clear-cut goal. But if we're going to end up either exactly where we were before or actually in a worse position where the Iranians know that they can put their boots over the neck of the Strait of Hormuz
They've
at any
discovered
point,
new power.
then surely this has been a war for nothing. And that's something which is going to trouble anyone who is looking upon this, particularly those who, took a chance on Trump when he said that he was going to do this, but it was necessary, even though that it was going to have this economic impact. We've landed with the economic impact, but none of the
I'm of the view that the economic impact is what they should have secured the Strait of Hormuz first, but the economic impact, I'm afraid, is a large price to pay, but a necessary price to pay to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons. But it won't have done that. Also extraordinary, this is expecting the Gulf states to put together to fund a $300 billion fund to sort of help rebuild Iran. I mean, most of the targets that were taken out by Israel and the US are military targets. Why would you be rebuilding the military that has just attacked you? I mean, we're not talking about the Marshall Plan for German civilians after the Second World War, which was about rebuilding and not having another, Versailles Treaty situation where there was that resentment built up and then another war, 10, 15, 20 years later. I mean, it's mind-blowing. I mean, genuinely, the Iranians are wrapping Donald Trump and his, no doubt, his property developer and golf buddy, negotiators round their little fingers. I mean, it's an absolute embarrassment. I'm pretty sure that the other G7 members who were at the summit in Evian, horrible stuff. Horrible. I hate that, honestly. Give me water out of a ditch any day. But the G7 summit in Evian on the banks of Lake Geneva. And a lot of their focus, they're going to be obviously trying to make sure the Strait of Hormuz is reopened because, of course, they need the oil, the oil, the fertiliser, liquefied natural gas coming out of that. Zelensky is going to be there as well. There's an announcement coming today from Starmer, Mr. Action Man, of new Russian shadow fleet sanctions. Again, what's the point of those sanctions when it's OK for us legally to, despite these sanctions, to buy oil that comes from India that has come originally from Russia? I mean, the idea that all these years on, from 2022, when the Russian major invasion of, after 2014, but after the full-on invasion of Ukraine began, the idea that there are any more sanctions to bring on, frankly, amazes me. The fact that we're not actually enforcing the sanctions we've already got. This is all just a pretense. I mean, even, we've got the captain of the Russian Shadow Fleet tanker detained by the UK. He's appearing in court today, an Indian national. The other crew are sitting there on the boat. But we know perfectly well that the British Navy wouldn't have been able to intercept this tanker if there'd been any Russian warships, as there'd been previously with them coming through the channel. I mean, this is an absolute joke. Talking the talk, can't walk the walk. Kemi Badenoch yesterday said the Prime Minister should resign if he doesn't keep his word on defence. We lost his Defence Secretary, his Armed Forces Minister last Thursday. Here he is talking the talk. I mean, it's all just words. Yeah,
it's all just words. It's all just posturing. But this has been the response, not just from Britain, but from large parts of the EU for many months now, which is to say that we stand with Ukraine, we stand with Ukraine, we stand with Ukraine, we stand against Russia. And yet beyond these quite performative things that they do when the risk is pretty low, i.e. seizing one of these ghost fleet ships when no one is around to protect it, when it comes to it properly stepping up, whether that's in terms of arming yourself, whether that's in terms of, not actually buying Russian hydrocarbons as European states have continued to do. The EU countries have spent more on buying Russian fossil fuels over the course of this conflict than they have in giving aid to Ukraine. That's just a fact.
It genuinely makes you want to despair.
And yet every 6 months they have a summit and they sign a communicate and they all make that
hug
face.
Zelensky.
They hug each other.
He must. I mean, obviously he was treated appallingly by Donald Trump, and he's no longer supplying weapons. Now it is us, it is the EU and Britain who are buying the weapons from America to give to Ukraine, which I believe is a small price to pay. I think it's absolutely justified. I was very, very encouraged the other day to see a poll from the British public. More than 50% of the British public still believe that higher energy costs, although they are aware of it and they're unhappy about it, that they wouldn't give up supporting Ukraine to lower those energy costs, which I think tells a really interesting story. People get it. People understand how significant this is, even if Donald Trump doesn't. But again, it's just utterly soul-destroying, because if there were serious, proper sanctions, as Zelensky's pointed out a million times, they would be able to break the Russian war effort. Why don't they do that? Why don't they do that? And why did anyone think? I mean, we had a tiny amount of our oil and gas coming from Russia. It was like 2 or 3%. Countries like Germany, they've become more sane under people like Friedrich Merz. Although, to be fair, I mean, he's massively unpopular in his country, which is extraordinary because he's done a hell of a lot of very sensible stuff to turn back the clock on the madness of the sort of the eco years. But why anyone in a Western European country thought it was a really good idea to rely on Russian gas? I mean, when Russia has been acting the way it has for the last, Putin for the last 10, 20 years, is beyond. It's borderline criminal on the part of our democratic leaders.
It is. It'd be one thing if they didn't have any indications that Russia might be in a slightly more revanchist mood. I mean, people act as if the invasion of Ukraine came out completely of the clear blue, as if Crimea never happened, as if Georgia never happened, as if Russia had not continued to wage all kinds of forms of hybrid warfare
and
against different countries.
And said that they were going to recover Ukraine. I mean,
it was
they were going to do it.
It was that sort of end of history complacency, wasn't it? It was this idea that really, even though the indications where Russia is concerned aren't good, that we're not really going to go back to land wars in Europe and all the rest of it. That looks like a historic and catastrophic mistake now, certainly on the part of many countries like Germany.
Yeah, it's almost like they got everything wrong, isn't it? I mean, we're still living with repercussions of the resignation of the Defence Secretary. As Kemi Badenoch gives, it was a very busy news day yesterday. Kemi Badenoch giving a speech saying basically Keir Starmer needs to go if he doesn't keep his word on defence. But again, that involves and whoever is going to be the leader of the Labour Party, if and when there is a by-election result this week that changes things, we are looking at a lot more money needs to be found. It's got to be found from somewhere. What was interesting, I mean, this Russia arson attack story is absolutely fascinating. And look, there's been rumours going around ever since we had May last year. We had a firebomb attack on the Prime Minister's former family home, where his sister-in-law was now living, his car, which he hadn't used for a while, and a flat he also owned previously lived in. Firebomb attacks within 2 or 3 days of each other. 3 men were arrested. 2 of them were found guilty yesterday. One a Ukrainian, one a Romanian. Another found not guilty. Rumours all over the internet ever since then about these young men, one of whom had worked as a model, and how they were Ukrainian rent boys. Lots of rumours swirling about, Keir Starmer. I mean, people have actually come up to me in the street and go, "Is it true? Is it true?" That's very much been put about by Russian, Russian bots and it's all about that whole thing where they just try and destabilise everything, stir things up. There's no doubt at all about that. And now, the BBC have said their investigation, I think other organisations doing it as well, showing that it was the Russians who were behind this conspiring to commit arson, deliberate targeting of the Prime Minister. Because everyone was going, well, hold on a minute, if you're targeting the Prime Minister, he lives in Downing Street, he doesn't live here. But it's about spreading rumours and the like. But basically, the handler who offered money to these 2 young men, he offered Russian citizenship in return for one of the attacks. In various messages, he offered money. He's a young Russian diplomat, 23-year-old, son of a senior official. His name is Evgeny Lyukshin, and he's close to basically the highest levels of power in Moscow. This is typical sort of Russian Cold War stuff. But coming after things like the Salisbury attack, it does seem to be remarkably amateur hour.
It does. I think it's the extent to which the Russian state, or the Russian sort of oligarchy more broadly, tends to do things in a slightly arm's length manner. So it's not necessarily that you've got a unit within the Russian state which is directing certain forms of attacks or espionage or whatever, but that people are kind of set on their way to, given the indication that it would be approved of if they did X, Y, Z thing. You saw this a lot with a lot of the kind of trolling and the hacking and the things that would go on there. There would always be enough plausible deniability. It's not like you could trace it back to one office within the Kremlin.
Well, like the Salisbury attackers, I mean, they were proper, SBU, was it FSU officials, whatever, I can't remember the name of the FSB officials, and
FSU is a much better organisation.
Sorry about that. Free Speech Union, sorry. And the FBU, the Fire Brigade Union, not kidding either of you, very confused right now. But they were just tourists who were just just heard an awful lot about the Salisbury.
They were just
Cathedral spire.
They couldn't wait to see that spire. And in this case, these poor, misled Ukrainian rent boys, they're not rent boys, of course. I mean, that was one part of this story that I always...
Well, they were rented, it would appear.
They were rented, just not for that purpose. And I think, if anything, whilst I can understand, while in the absence of much information, you know, whenever reporting restrictions have kicked in for a trial, there's often a lot of swirling rumour mill, whatever.
And it always happens when people go, why isn't the media talking about this? Because it's the law.
Not allowed to, yeah. That's basically what it comes down to. But, you know, Keir Starmer's far too boring a person to be cavorting with Ukrainian rent boys. It failed the sniff test on that.
I think that's a very fair defence.
So, aside from anything else, don't always believe what you read, not least because a lot of it can be, even if it's not the Ruskies up to no good, it can just be speculation upon speculation, which isn't necessarily going to lead.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's the sort of thing we wouldn't be allowed to see if you're under 16 now, that's for sure. The Apple and Google are going to be forced to check ID on phones over social media ban. Social media companies have hit back. Elon Musk, boss of X, of course. We know he's the real target. Who are we kidding? I mean, come on. You think if X wasn't owned by one of the lefty liberal bros in California, that this wouldn't be happening. He's basically said the UK is a police state. Now it is extraordinary because we've got Liz Kendall. I mean, it's painful to listen to the interviews. I push myself through it because you have to. But she's basically Ofcom is going to introduce age verification by October, and the idea is it's going to be on the phone, so it won't have to be for every app. I mean, they haven't got a clue what they're doing. What the Prime Minister announced yesterday had no detail at all. They didn't include Blue Sky, the right-on lefty version of X, but suddenly they have now included it because everyone went, oh, this is political, you're only including X, not Blue Sky. They don't have a clue how they're going to do it. There's a lot of talk about it's only going to affect children and future children, but actually there's no doubt at all. We had the brilliant Silky Carlo from Big Brother Watch on the show yesterday to sort of talk through these issues. Because look, I'm a mum. I've seen how much it damaged. We've been very lucky in our home. And again, I don't know. Was it firm parenting? Was it just my kid? Was it the peer group? I don't know. We've never had an issue with any of this, but I know a hell of a lot of parents who have. And I think there's a massive issue of just a failure of parenting and the inability many parents have, the unwillingness to assert authority. Lib Dem MP was putting out a picture. OK, she didn't show her daughter's face, but she did a private dinner table conversation with her 6-year-old daughter, which is appalling. Please, everyone, stop putting your kids online. Do you ever see any pictures of my kid online? Do you even know her name? No, because you protect your children's privacy if you love them. I'm sorry, I really think it's appalling what people do. And she's a Lib Dem MP and she's supporting the ban. And her child is getting distraught and upset about not being able to be on YouTube. And it's like, love, if your 6-year-old is that upset about not seeing YouTube, your kid's watching way too much YouTube.
Yeah.
And she's exactly the sort of parent where they're aiming this at. But she could just use her authority as a parent. She said she was having a difficult conversation with a 6-year-old. There's no such thing as a difficult conversation with a 6-year-old.
No, exactly.
You're the parent, they're the kid, you tell them what to do. That's how it works in our house, and it's worked very well. And that's what our parents did with us, and it worked very well. And it's the parents who think that you don't have that, you don't negotiate with a 6-year-old. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't understand what these parents are thinking. It's just that's part of the problem. But basically, we are all going to end up having to give our own ID. We're going to have to put up passports, driving licence, all the ID, which is, you're told, for the love of God, don't let that be available to hackers. Plus, we've got the risk of the control of what we can see, what we can say, what we can hear, that is going to come about as a result of that. And I know you've joined me on a lot of these issues. Sorry, but we don't trust the tech companies and we don't trust the government.
No, exactly. And the government likes to posture against the tech companies from time to time, but they're basically handing them so much more data, so much more of our privacy, whether it's in the form of face scanning or ID or digital ID, of course, got mentioned again in the course of yesterday.
Of course it did,
the policy that just won't flush. There is clearly going to be an impact, not for all adults, for all of our ability to be online in as free and as private a way as possible. Well, that's pretty already corroded. And then where young people are concerned, I mean, certainly the ones who are already online, already digitally native, they will get around this. The evidence from Australia already is that they just migrate over to much less reputable apps operating in other countries. They do know their way around VPNs. And I think a lot of this does come down to a lack of faith in parents, sometimes a lack of faith in parents themselves.
I have a lack of faith in a lot of parents.
And this is the problem, because I think the more society becomes almost infantilised, the more that people expect the state to step in, the more that they think it's impossible.
Feed their kids.
It's impossible for me to look after myself or even my own children, therefore please, government, come in and help us. The more the government encroaches upon those civil liberties, it's a really horrendous dynamic. And I think one other big part of the picture here is that I think a lot of adults have to take responsibility for the fact that a lot of this is projecting their own anxieties about their own social media use onto their children. They know that they are also zombified by a lot of this technology, that they should just put it down.
We know how damaging, we know how addictive. You know, you have a quick look at, you should get into bed, just a quick look, like, let's say, reply to that message you didn't get around to earlier. The next thing you know, it's an hour later. I mean, yeah, exactly. Which is why you need to be more careful with your children. Again, but it's the same as things like, you want to be fat, that's your business. If your kid is fat, then that's your responsibility. I mean, you have a duty of care to your child that it goes over and above. I mean, I'm sorry, you just do. I'm so in two minds on it, because I think I simply do not trust the tech companies. I don't trust the government to not use this as a way of controlling what I see. I know that there are so many stories, there's so much information, that simply in so many battles that we, over things like trans rights, over lockdowns, masks on our children in school, all of this stuff, loads of this stuff would not be known to us. You wouldn't have seen that video. You would not have seen that video of that horrific attempted beheading in Belfast. You wouldn't be able to have that conversation. There's loads of the stuff we simply would not see if it wasn't for a lot of the social media. That stuff was barely being touched by mainstream media. In fact, being openly, dismissed by it. Let's talk about another story. This is a difficult one. Don't turn off. I'm not going to give you all the details because, my God, I can't. Just don't even want to know. We've got a secondary school teacher, Jamie Varley. He's found guilty yesterday of, I think shocking is not a word that does justice to this crime, sexual abuse and the murder of a baby boy, Preston Davey, that he and his partner had adopted, or they were adopting. He's got a life sentence coming up. Again, not good enough for him, over the death of the 13-month-old. He suffocated during sexual abuse. I think we can all guess what was going on there. Let's not go into details. His partner, John McGowan Fazakerley, is a sales manager for a finance company. He was also convicted of charges including causing or allowing Preston's death and jointly participating in sexual assault. Prosecutors said it was one of the worst and most shocking and horrific cases they have ever dealt with. There is a lot, middle-class, nice couple, nice gay couple, lovely home in Blackpool. They were approved for adoption. They got given this baby, perfectly healthy, happy baby, whose sister was adopted by the grandmother, who was not able to take, at that time, the brother. We're told there are many, many opportunities to save the baby that were not taken to hospital 3 times with injuries that should have made the staff suspicious. And there is this real concern that, and I've got no issue with gay people adopting. That's one of the things same rights as other couples. By the way, they wouldn't have to adopt if straight parents who'd had kids were looking after their kids better. But there is a real concern that this couple were able to get a baby and were given the benefit of the doubt in a way that other couples would not have been, because they ticked a right-on progressive box because they were gay. I've had so many friends who've gone onto adoption lists and waiting, long, happy, married, heterosexual couples who have waited, 10 years for a baby. The only babies on offer, you're getting children who've been horribly damaged and abused, 8 years old. You're getting babies who are victims of drugs or fetal alcohol syndrome, basically severely physically and mentally damaged children. And some parents say, quite understandably, they don't feel they can cope with that. They want to be loving, but they've got to be realistic. And they're not getting babies. The getting a baby in adoption is virtually unheard of, OK? And yet this very, very young baby, maybe only a few months old, was given to this couple, and no action was taken when there was clear concern that this child was being hurt. There is a real worry that, again, people thinking they're being progressive has basically meant that a baby has died.
No, absolutely. And I think there's also a real worry here that, despite the fact that, the state is not casual in how quickly it can take kids off of parents these days, and yet you do see in the opposite direction scandals like this happen time and time again. The ease with which cases like this seem to slip through the net despite various warning signs. It seems like we have one of these horrific cases at least every 5 or 10 years now, ones that really stand out.
Well, the ones we hear about.
Well, exactly, the ones, and there's going to be so many.
The babies that don't die, we don't hear about. The ones that just survive, we don't hear about.
But, you know, everything, Baby P, Daniel Pelk, all these cases going back historically, it's one of those, you just can't wrap your head around how these things are missed. I mean, of course, there is always, I suppose, going to be a level of evil. There's no other way to describe the depraved crimes that were perpetrated here. And cases like this, I don't know about you, Julia, really, you know, test my opposition to the death penalty.
I was just going to ask you about that.
At the very least,
I'm remarkably relaxed about what happens to him behind bars, put it that way.
That's a compromise I can also agree to. And it's one of those things where, at the very least, they should never see the light of day again. I mean, that should even be a question.
This is the bit I don't understand. Like, again, these grooming gangs, we've got... I mean, there's this appeal against Henry Novak, sentence of 21 years... his killer, Vikram Digwa. He's been sentenced to life sentence, minimum of 21 years. And that's been referred to on its too lenient a sentence. I did not. I thought that was a very strong sentence. I was very surprised he got such a long sentence. They often don't get me. It's cold-blooded killing. It seems to me we've got to for these sort of cold-blooded killings and, you know, and lies and preventing him getting hospital treatment, which could have saved him possibly. It is quite clear to me that he should be coming out in a coffin and no other way. And the same for, you know, these grooming gang rapes. We get these grooming gangs, and they've been convicted of basically of gang raping these girls for years on end, numerous cases, and then they get like 8 years or 14 years. They serve about half of it. I mean, like 8 years is appropriate. Why? And it's all, and their sentence was concurrent. You know, instead of consecutive. In America, you get these, like, 250 years because you get the sentence for each one of the rapes or each one of the murders. We need to start doing that. And as I've said a million times before, when you're sentenced to a number of years behind bars, you serve that number of years, full stop, end of. And, we want good behaviour in prison. Yeah, well, then you serve more if there isn't good behaviour in prison. I mean, I don't understand why we're being lied to like this, but we haven't got the sentencing yet of this man and his partner, but yeah, I'm opposed to the death penalty. I would quite happily kill him with my own bare hands, and I'm telling you, if he did that to a member of my family, I'm just going to be honest. And I think any normal human being would feel the way that the world would be a better place if he wasn't on it. I want to hear your thoughts on this. Please give us a call 0344 499 1000. Your thoughts on this case. Again, if you're like us, if you're opposed to the death penalty, but these are the sort of cases that make you go, I'm happy to rethink it. What your thoughts are on Russia being behind this firebombing of the Prime Minister's house, flat and car. What is going on there? Social media ban. Loads of calls on that yesterday. Would we even discuss any of these stories if there was a social media ban? Logging in, giving your own details. Even, they're not just going to be checking the children. They're going to check all of us. It is going to be digital ID by the back door. And this US-Iran deal as well. The details are emerging. It looks, frankly, like we're going to be in a worse position than we were before the bombing of Iran began. Give us a call. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of those stories and anything else you want to have your say on. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
We've got some breaking news that has just come in. talkSPORT have announced a brand new partnership in a developing story. We hear they've created So Good Lager right in time for football's big summer. Just in, we're hearing that So Good Lager will be pouring pints across all O'Neill's pubs and some of the best sports pubs across the UK. With the big kickoff just around the corner, you can find out where to get your hands on a fresh pint of So Good Lager at talksport.com/lager.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Welcome back to the show. Just going to get to some of your text messages very, very quickly. I don't know how many Russian bots are involved in this. Maybe they're targeting us as well. Russia was behind the arson attacks targeting Keir Starmer's home and car. It's been real. What's your reaction? Donald says, I don't believe them. He's looking for sympathy after messing up Britain. This is true. Dave says, simply rubbish. That's a huge claim, says Al. What's your evidence? Well, I mean, there's really quite a lot of evidence, it would appear, from the BBC investigation. Ben says, I'm starting to think Russia might actually be the good guys. Ben, I mean, I know people could be taking the mick and everything, but can we be clear about the fact that these were arson attacks on a family home that people were actually living in, and his sister-in-law and child actually, had to sort of try and get out of the house after being firebombed. I mean, I think we should take it a bit more seriously. That Gary says it's such nonsense. Toby says Starmer has learned to trick off the Democrats in America, just blame Russia. Only lefties, says Eugene, are falling for this psyop. And Susan says, I think Putin would be a lot more sophisticated in such a plot. This is truly laughable, and nobody believes Putin was behind this. Tom Slater, what do you make of that? People are not impressed with those claims.
No, they're not. And of course, at this point, there's still a fair amount of secrecy as to what happened here. But if you read that
no
BBC...
statement from the Prime Minister.
No statement from the Prime Minister. If you read that BBC report, I mean, it's not as if they can draw a kind of direct line, but you just line up all of those facts and it would pretty clearly indicate where some of the blame might lie here. Of course, there is an understandable amount of fatigue with the sort of blame Russia reflex, given what we saw happen in America with the Russiagate hoax and the attempt to pin Donald Trump's election on Russian bots and intervention and so on and so forth. That has been an infuriating aspect of domestic
people
politics
still
for some
spout
time.
that stuff. I mean, it's like totally debunked.
Brexit blamed on Russia, bad weather blamed on Russia. We've all experienced that. At the same time, the Russian state, the kleptocratic, increasingly authoritarian place that it is, it's not one of the good guys. It's not beyond the wit of man that maybe they might be involved in this kind of chicanery, given what they get up to against their own citizens, let alone anyone
exactly.
else.
We're going to talk to Lord Richard Dannett. He's the former head of the British Army. He's going to be in the studio in an hour and a half's time, get his thoughts on all of this, because, they're very aware of all this stuff. I did mention, just in relation to that, actually, it is very sadly the 10th anniversary of the murder of Jo Cox, the Labour MP, murdered during the Brexit campaign. And it's interesting, her sister, her widowed husband, have very sort of called for things like common ground after 10 years of her murder, and look, I mean, it's a horrible death. I mean, she was a mum of 2 young kids. Absolutely horrific murder. It's very noticeable to me, though. I mean, the BBC did tributes and everything. The focus on Jo Cox's murder far outweighs the focus that's ever been on David Amos's murder by an Islamist, and it's because we all know why. OK, she was a young woman, a mum, we get that, but the focus is so much on the fact that it was very much used during the Brexit debate ahead of the referendum as literally Brexit campaigners were when it was discovered that it was a far-right extremist who had murdered her, that Thomas Mayer, that it was Brexit, it was the far-right Brexit voters who had somehow led to her death. I mean, and now they're calling for common ground, but the focus is on her death always, rather than, I think, on David Amos's, because it's that uncomfortable thing, well, David Amos was murdered by an Islamist extremist, and they just don't want to talk about that. And it's absolutely awful that either of these people was murdered, absolutely horrific, and none of this should happen. But it does seem to me, when these people talk about common ground and who should come together, it is not the mainstream on the right who are going around calling people who are mainstream on the left, evil, Hitler, far-right, racist bigots. It's not us doing that. That's coming from one side. Now, the far left and the far right, the genuine far right, they are both as awful as each other. And frankly, they're virtually the same as each other. But But in terms of mainstream, the right wing has not they've not delivered those slurs against the left in the same way. They just simply haven't.
No, they haven't, and it's clear that when there is talk at points like this about the need to tamp things down, to find common ground, the idea that political leaders or social media or media in general, as Kim Leadbeater was talking about over the course of the past 24 hours, need to be more responsible. You know who they're getting at. There is this sense that there is only one side waging this culture war, when, as you said, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that it kind of goes in the other direction. And I think it does us no favours to treat this as an opportunity to tamp down political debate. I think what this is about having out things in a reasoned, tolerant,
addressing people's genuine concerns and not saying they're jumping on a far-right bandwagon.
Exactly. That's what it comes down to.
Absolutely. Look, I wanted to go to a caller. We had a bit of a tech problem. They're trying to get to a caller on. Richard, I know you're on the line. I'm going to come to you in the next hour. I absolutely promise. Thank you so much for waiting on the line. We're going to take a quick break now. Up next, political editor of the New World, James Ball. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:38 is the time. Let's talk to James Ball now. He's political editor of New World. Very good morning to you, James.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Lots of international news at the moment. We've got the Prime Minister over strutting the world stage. He loves this stuff. All PMs do, don't they? Over at the G7 in Evian. And Donald Trump is going to be arriving. We've got this, lots of talk about taking tougher action on you. In fact, Trump is speaking right now in Evian-le-Bain. But we've got, lots of tough talk about taking on Russians and these oil tankers and intercepting them. A lot of talk about, the Iran deal. The reality is the West is abjectly failing at dealing with these major threats, isn't it?
I mean, yes and no. I think Ukraine's doing a pretty good job. It's just dubious how much help they're getting from the rest of us. They've got a pretty good arms industry of their own right now, and they're kind of showing us how it's done.
Absolutely.
I think that the rest of us are a little bit all over the place, and I imagine this sort of summit is a little bit less fun. This G7 summit, sorry, is a bit less fun for Keir than usual because of the whole defence investment plan sort of fiasco. I think he's got to be a bit nervous about talking to Donald Trump between the social media ban and the investment, and it being quite obvious he's not hitting Trump's sort of imposed targets. I wonder if this might be quite an uncomfortable one, given that summits are usually, as you say, Keir's happy place.
Oh, yes, exactly. Look, they all love it. And Macron's an awful lot of these world leaders are profoundly unpopular at home, but they struck the world stage. But the reality is, I mean, even we've had, the seizing of that Russian oil tanker yesterday, and a man's appearing in court today, an Indian national in relation to that, and talk about how we're going to be doing more about that and all this gung-ho stuff. This is all looking very embarrassing for the Prime Minister, when only last Thursday his own Defence Secretary and Armed Force Minister as well resigned, saying that basically he's leaving our defences wide open by not giving enough money for our military. I mean, he can talk the talk, but everyone knows he can't walk the walk, including, by the way, Russia.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, you can't defeat Russia with accounting tricks. I really wish you could.
Or fiscal rules.
at some point you have to actually find the money, and they've done all sorts of little bits of trickery to find things that look like money. I mean, one of the big things that's hidden under this is they tried to redefine military pensions to count towards defence spending.
Well, that's been done for a long... Tories did that as well.
Oh, of course. That's great at hitting the number, but we do actually need, more weaponry, more sort of advanced drones, all of this stuff, and that needs money, and it's the Prime Minister's job to find it. I don't blame the Treasury here. Like, if you're going to say you have to work in these budgets, it's the Treasury's job to go, the sums don't add up. This was on Starmer, and so I do think it's quite an uncomfortable one for him.
Oh, I'm very much so. Well, and it's a dangerous one for us. What do you make of this revelation that Russia is behind the firebombing of the Prime Minister's house, flat and car last year? It was a lot of claim that it was, it was Ukrainian rent boys. You will have seen, you're online a lot, all of these rumours flying around about Keir Starmer and how did he know these rent boys, one of them being, of course, a model. Two of the three men charged have been convicted, the Ukrainian and a Romanian man. We're told now that actually they were contacted via the social media site Telegram, and that they were offered money, even Russian citizenship, by a young Russian diplomat posing under the wonderful name El Money, EL being his initials. What do you make of this and all the rumours swirling around about this?
So there's pretty good evidence that the rumours it was Ukrainian rent boys actually also came from Russia.
Yes,
and
that's what I was told very early on.
Yeah. I mean, that you could
by
find
people
that
I
quite
trust,
easily.
not by the government. By the way.
BBC, by the way, are the ones. The government is trying to say nothing on this. They're not the ones pushing this narrative. The BBC have done some really good journalism, and you can see their receipts on this. There is a good audit trail. This is convincing. This isn't a random claim. It is not an attempt by Russia to assassinate Keir Starmer. No. This was not like, if people are looking and going, well, obviously they wouldn't do that. Russia likes messing with us. They will pay people to put up pro-Sharia, pro sort of Islamist graffiti, and pay other people to put up anti-Islamist graffiti.
They're just trying to stir up dissent. And there's evidence, isn't there, in this report that they've been, behind some of the attacks, anti-Semitic attacks, to sort of make and on attacks on a mosque, just stir up dissent in our society.
Exactly. Anything that is already a hot button issue, anything that divides us, they push on things like immigration as well. They push because lots of real people care about it, and they sort of try and hit our weaknesses, and this is a good example of that. And we should be able to go, look, these guys are awful, they are trying to screw with us, they are a threat to our society, whether you hate Starmer or not. And as you say, the family who are in there, they're distantly related to Starmer. They're, his in-laws, but this was
they're real human beings.
Innocent, and they could have been hurt. This was a firebomb. This wasn't a prank.
No, exactly. And I do think people need to take it more seriously. But again, it is sort of risible. You think, well, hold on a minute. We've had that horrific attack on Salisbury. And someone died. As a result of that, people were really seriously hurt, and frankly, thousands of people could have died given the risk with the drug that they used. They could do some very serious attacks. The attack on Litvinenko, highly sophisticated. But again, Putin wants us to know he's behind it. It's part of the game, isn't it?
Exactly. And there are, as you say, very high level, very sophisticated operations. And then there are ones that are basically clown shows. It is a little bit like saying just because your council can't sort the bins on time means MI6 is rubbish. The Russian state is big and has many bodies. We do sometimes make problems for ourselves. I am as ardent a Remainer and a rejoiner as you could want. I don't think Russia interfered in the Brexit vote. I think after the vote, they polarised the debate. There is, however,
no. That was the Ramonas that did that.
Well, we all polarised it ourselves, but Russia joined in.
No. People who wanted the biggest result of the biggest vote of any democratic vote in our country's history to be enacted. That's not polarising it. The people who reneged on their view that they would honour the result of the referendum, those are the people who polarised it.
You should see my mentions sometimes. But just to stick to the Russia point,
they can't compete with mine, my love. No. How are people saying you need to enact the results of a referendum? How are they in any way stirring up anything?
No, I'm literally just trying to talk about where Russia interferes and doesn't.
Yeah, but I don't. I always pull you up on this stuff because it matters.
They did intervene in Trump's election. What there wasn't was evidence that Trump or anyone high up in his campaign was colluding, but they did hack Hillary Clinton's campaign. They did get the emails out.
Yep.
That could have been quite influential.
But it's whether or not they had any influence in terms of him actually winning or not. Can I ask you just finally, Ukraine, President Zelensky is going to be at the summit. Ukraine has formally started, the process of applying to join the EU. These things take many, many years. Big concerns about corruption. We know long-standing corruption in all former communist states in the Soviet Union states in Ukraine. But would you, as a massive EU fan, would you support Ukraine joining the EU?
I think if we don't want it to be pulled into Russia's orbit, we want it to be pulled towards Europe and the West, and hopefully the accession process will minimise the corruption and get it ready. It will be a long, slow process. It's not ready to come in yet. I think it's symbolic more than anything.
James Ball, good to talk to you, political editor of the New World. Just to get we've got Donald Trump has been meeting with Qatar's Emir on the sidelines of the G7 summit in France. He started off with remarks about the Iran deal, and he said he thinks this deal is a fair deal. It's a good deal. We haven't seen all the details. We've had 2 different versions, perhaps 3 different versions. But he slams reports that the deal would require the US to invest money in Iran. He calls that ridiculous. No obligation to invest money in Iran. There's talk about this $300 billion reconstruction plan. But there's talk about the Gulf states being asked to do that. So who knows what the reality is. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to be talking to Unplugged Coalition's Jennifer Powers, what she makes of what we know, although it seems to change every 5 minutes, about this plan for a social media ban for under 16-year-olds. She's up next. This is Talk.
Violence on the streets, there's no excuse for that, and if there are protests following this, I just hope that they remain non-violent. I mean, you can understand the community concerns after an attack like that.
People were saying all around the world, that's what British people now think. Have a listen to Rob from yesterday.
Morning, Jez. Well, yes, rightly, you shouldn't condone what happened. What else have people got to do? The political class are not listening. These people who are coming over here illegally, they're rapists, terrorists, they're coming over here, it's literally like putting a wolf in a sheep field.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:49 is the time. Well, so much of yesterday's show was about the Prime Minister's announcement yesterday morning about that social media ban for under 16s. And even though he spoke for a bit, and then we've had statements from Liz Kendall and various other folk from representing the government, still trying to work out how the hell they think they're actually going to instigate this ban. Latest from Liz Kendall, the Tech and Science Secretary, is that they're actually going to be targeting the people who make the phones. So this is Apple and Google. They're responsible for iPhones and all Android phones, and basically you're going to have to by October have to verify your age. But how do you verify your age without giving away your full identity? And is this going to be for, let's face it, adults too, in which case it's just digital ID by the back door, is it not? Is it going to save any children from what they see online? Let's talk to Jennifer Powers about this. She joins us once again. She's the founder and director of the Unplugged Coalition. It's a campaign to reclaim childhood from addictive technology. Good morning to you once again, Jennifer.
Good morning, Julia.
Look, we've talked before, and again, I'm so in two minds. And my guest on the show yesterday, I want kids off social media. I would like kids largely not to be sitting on their phones all day. I don't think kids, certainly before they're at secondary school, should even have a smartphone. Shouldn't have them in schools. Should be very limited in what they can do, and we need something done. Is what the government has announced so far, whatever it is, because it seems very confused, is that going to keep children safe? And is it also, though, a bit too much of a sledgehammer to crack a nut?
Well, I broadly welcome the government's announcement yesterday. It was a rare occasion when I was full of appreciation of our Prime Minister for...
Not often we say that.
Yeah, how often? For once, I give him unreserved praise and am full of admiration for what he's done. And, in the past, I've been critical of him for his U-turns, but on this one, I was very, very happy. Listen, it's not the whole answer, but do I think it will make a meaningful difference? Absolutely. I think we've now decided as a society, and at least the government has decided, that they will intervene in protecting children from social media and the worst of the internet. And now the debate turns to how, what that looks like. And as you rightly say, there's a big debate about whether that should happen at the operating system level of the phone. And that's why Google and Apple are named, versus whether that should happen at a platform level. And that's why Meta and others are so against that, because that would be happening on when you went on to Facebook.
But the thing is, you and I both know already that they're both on all kinds of phones. Any phone you can buy, there are clear adult settings. You can go in and you can set this to protect your child from you can set timers. There's loads of ways you can protect children. Now, I've got a problem with the algorithms they've got for adults as well as children, but particularly for children. But there are child protection systems available right now which parents are not using or children are already overriding. So how is this actually going to work? And we've told the Prime Minister, he's going to learn the lessons from what happened in Australia. Well, 6 months on, 60% of under 16-year-olds in Australia are still on social media. So the lesson is that doesn't work.
Well, I take a slightly different lesson, that 40% of children are being protected, which is millions and millions of children every day.
Or 40% of children. Again, I get that, we still, and the Prime Minister said yesterday, just because some children drink under the age of 18, I would say most at some point, you don't not have laws about that or other things. But the age of consent and things like that. But when it is most children not obeying the law, and most parents happily allowing that, that's a law that doesn't work.
Well, we are lucky in a way that Australia went first, because we can learn the lessons and we can do it better. And I'm sure that will be the case. And I'm sure it will still need to be improved once it comes in. They're talking about spring of 2027. Let's see, there might be court cases. This might take even longer.
It will definitely take longer.
Yeah, I agree. But in Australia, they have to use age verification, which under the reasonable steps to verify age. Whereas here in the UK, the government has pledged that the tech industry will need to use highly effective age verification or age assurance. So already the onus is being put on the tech platforms to get their house in order and use the technology that they well have. So I think from day one, we will see higher than the 40% success rate. But I do accept that it won't be 100% and that it will build over time as we change.
But how many parents who already would rather their kids were sat on a phone and you're talking to them and saying I'm bored or having a tantrum, whatever, are just going to give them their phone or log them on, do the age verification for them so that they can then be on that?
Oh, I think you're right. I think a number of parents will do that. And that's why I think this is just part of the culture change that we need to see. And when we have schools bringing in robust smartphone-free policies, that's important, not just because it safeguards kids during the day. They don't get, filmed and bullying and all of that kind of stuff. It also sends a really strong message to families, to parents, to say, listen, your school is telling you that your child not only doesn't need a smartphone, but it won't be allowed onto school grounds. Therefore, please don't give one to them. Please don't buy one for them. And so that helps change cultural norms. I think this restricting of social media will do the same. So I accept it's not a magic wand or a magic bullet, but I do think it's a really important step.
But I'm with you. I'm with you on the culture change. I feel strongly about it on the schools, the number of hours and what kids are doing online and what they should be doing instead, talking to people face to face, families, friends, doing sport, outdoors, just mucking around, being a bit bored. It's really good for you. Doing chores. Remember that? Remember when kids had to do chores?
I know, it's only, right?
But this stuff worked. But here's the thing. Verifying the age for a child is very different from verifying the age for adults as well. A lot of people, and I'm among them, who are concerned that this isn't going to actually protect children. A lot of them, and we've got NSPCC, we've got the parents of a number of children who have died as a result of, TikTok challenges and the like, who have said very, very clearly. One of them called the show yesterday, another is Ian Russell, the father of Molly Russell, just very, very clearly, this isn't going to protect children, it's going to push children into the deep, dark web. But at the same time, people like me are very concerned that actually this is just digital ID by the back door.
Well, listen, it doesn't have to be digital ID by the
but
back
it will be,
or the front door. Well, that's a separate question. I mean, will it save and protect children? Absolutely, 100%. Not 100% of the children all the time, but it will make a massive difference. Now, you raise very legitimate concerns around privacy, and I think, like anything, there are trade-offs, and there are people on the other side of the argument than me that have taken a different value judgment, who have said, you know what, it's more important for them that civil liberties are protected and that no adult ever has to prove their age online.
No, not their age, prove who they are.
Well, who they are, and their age being the most important for this purpose. I, have strong free speech credentials, used to work at the Free Speech Union. Yeah. I take a more nuanced view. I say, listen, we are in a digital age now. It is not the world of 50 or 20 years ago. And we're going to have to figure out a way as a country, as a society, to protect children while doing our utmost to protect.
Absolutely. But a lot of us would say, it's parents who need to do it, and the very parents who aren't doing it right now are exactly the very parents who will allow their kids to get around this. But look, it's a really nuanced debate, and I agree with you, and it really must be, again, I really wish more in the media were treating this as the nuanced debate it is, because whenever we hear the word children's safety, in that case, it must be fine, and let's do it. And anyone who doesn't want to do it wants children to be harmed. That's not the case. It's the balance.
You should be applauded for this, because I think you're right. I think this is such a good debate, and to not just fall into these easy tropes, but to have a meaningful discussion of what that means is totally.
It's really good to talk to you. It's really interesting, exactly, to hear your perspective on that. Jennifer Powers from Unplugged Coalition, thank you so much. Let's bring in Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. Again, big free speech campaign. You're more of an absolutist, I think, on it than me. You haven't got kids, and I do think there's the whole thing about parent support, or children he knows of. I don't know. I do think there's the whole thing, the parent thing. We're constant parents support this, therefore it's good.
No, exactly. And given I don't have children, it means I can obviously pronounce on this with a great deal of candour and objectivity and authority. I think it does obviously come down to the fact that there is deep anxiety amongst parents about their children's social media use, about the extent to which this might be changing their relationship with socialising and leading to heightened anxiety. All of that is totally fair. The question is, what is the solution to this? We can all agree that even if we don't buy the argument that it's completely destroying young people, that it's not healthy and it's not positive for kids to be glued to their phones for this amount of time. It's a very simple solution to that. Don't buy them the phone, put controls on the phone, take away the phone.
Again, the parents will say, it's very difficult when every other kid in their class has their phone and they're the only kid that doesn't get included in, everything's arranged. It's like, look, it's like you're in my world, not having WhatsApp. You don't have WhatsApp, no one's including you in anything. You won't know about there's a party on Saturday night. You won't know. This is the issue. We're going to carry on this debate. I want to hear from you as well on this and all the big topics. Donald Trump has just said he thought that Ukraine war was going to be easy to solve. We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. We're fast approaching 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you so much for joining us. An awful lot to talk about. If you miss anything from the show with you all the way till 1 o'clock, you can have a look at my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. I still don't know how they came up with that name. It's brilliant. Hit subscribe and then you never have to miss a thing. We're going to be talking about what's going on at the G7 summit in Evian-le-Bain. We've already got some extraordinary words from Donald Trump. We'll talk about that. Lots to talk about the Iran deal, also the Ukraine war as well. Also a lot of talk about seizing Russian fleet of shadow oil tankers at the same time as Russia appears to be targeting our Prime Minister with this extraordinary set of arson attacks on his properties, and with which 2 men were convicted yesterday as part of a sabotage campaign by the Russian state. Judging by your messages, whether they're all Russian bots or they're genuine audience members, who knows? But you're not very convinced. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Plus, we're also going to be talking about that horrific case of the killer teacher found guilty of murdering and sexually abusing a baby boy he'd adopted with his boyfriend. But did this couple get the baby because of DEI, because of concerns about fitting some quota for the number of gay couples having a baby, and were they given the benefit of the doubt far too much when a perfectly happy, healthy young baby deteriorated before everyone's eyes from the horrific sexual and physical abuse the child was suffering from, which eventually killed the little boy. It's the most horrific, harrowing case. I really appreciate hearing your thoughts on any and all of those stories. Also this week, today, we are going to be talking about judges. Tories want to strip the judges of their powers to rule on migrants' appeals against deportations, talking about leaving the ECHR, and plenty more besides. Do give us a call, any and all of those topics. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also get in touch on X at talkTV. Prefer it if you weren't a Russian bot. But calls are charged at national rate and text cost £1, standard network rate message. Joining me, I'd like to say, for the whole show is Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. Morning once again to you. Going to be talking a little bit later about where we are with the G7 summit with Trump, Ukraine, Iran, everything, with Lord Dannett, the former head of the British Army. He's going to be here in the studio. Love to hear his perspective on all of that. But just in terms of what's going on at that summit, Donald Trump has just been speaking. He said he doesn't believe in regime change in Iran. He said, I never cared about regime change. It's never important. When he first started that bombing on the 28th of Feb, there was basically calling on people to rise up. But that was never, to be fair, that was never a key target of the war. That would have been a happy bonus. They obviously expected it would happen. But he said hell will rain down on Iran if the peace deal is broken, if it develops a nuclear weapon. But we've also got very, very confusing picture about what the hell this deal involves. Some talk of $300 billion being given by the Gulf states who've been bombed by Iran to basically rebuild Iran. I mean, on what planet would you agree to do that? And the president saying that by Friday, when they want to announce this deal, possibly before then, that and it's just a page and a half memorandum of understanding, that the Strait of Hormuz will be open. We've got 500 tankers and other vessels still stuck in the Strait of Hormuz. There was 1,000 at one point, gradually making their way out, but being able to get through. Iran has said it's very clear they're going to charge a toll for people to use that strait. Now, this is absolutely, terrible precedent for international waters. I mean, who knows what this deal is, but given that there's a lot of talk about the Iranians, that allowing inspectors, but they're going to keep their enriched uranium, getting money, getting the sanctions lifted and the like, we are going to be in a worse position when it comes to the Iranian mullahs and their ability to build a bomb than we were before the invasion, the attack on February the 28th.
Well, it certainly looks that way. I mean, the best case scenario would be that it would get us back to a similar position to where we were when this war kicked off.
Yeah.
I think,
but with a massive hit to the world economy.
Exactly, and of course it's worth saying that the Islamic Republic has been pretty severely hit. It's obviously had that top strata of its leadership taken out, but at the same time it's still standing, and that was always the danger with a conflict like this. There was always two quite kind of plausible arguments on the for and against side for this conflict. On the for side, there was this sense that, you know, you needed to take out this threat, that Iran being a nuclear power, even Iran just having its ballistic missile capability at the level that it was, would create a situation in which they could build up that nuclear armaments without anyone being able to say boo about it. But on the other side, there was a sense about what if you end up emboldening this regime? What if you end up effectively giving it the power to close the Strait of Hormuz at any point that it wants to? It might not be as strong, but it has cards to play. It feels like this conflict, as it's drawing to a close in the form of this memorandum of understanding, is kind of fallen between both of those stools. It hasn't managed to achieve the war aims that were supposedly set for it, whilst at the same time it's leaving us with a picture which is arguably more delicate, fraught and favourable to the Iranians than when we went into this.
Absolutely true, and it's very clear that Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, who of course is, he, like the President of the United States, is facing elections, well, it's midterm elections, not actually presidential elections this November for America, but Netanyahu, you know, got a very shaky coalition. He's, you know, wants to be tough. Lots of unity in Israel when it comes to how to deal with, you know, the likes of Iran and indeed Hezbollah, and of course Hamas as well. But you know, all these different threats, all funded by Iran, and it's interesting. You know, Israel and Hezbollah have not signed up to this deal. Israel has said they're not going to withdraw their troops from southern Lebanon because while Hezbollah is still a threat. I mean, totally and utterly justified, in my view. But it's interesting, Donald Trump has just said in the last few moments at the G7 summit in France, he's declared that without him, there would be no Israel. He's warned Netanyahu that he has to be more responsible in Lebanon. He says, no other president was willing to do what I did. Israel would have been blown up a long time ago had I not gotten involved. There's no doubt at all America provides a lot of the aid for the Iron Dome and the like. But having been to Israel, I'm pretty sure the Israelis would have managed to defend themselves. I've been they and the Ukrainians I've been absolutely, I mean, awe of in terms of their fighting spirit. He said of the Israeli president, I've had a great relationship with Bibi, but now Bibi has to be more responsible with respect to Lebanon. Lebanon used to be a great country. Yeah, well, it was a great country before Hezbollah took it over. He says Lebanon has been treated the worst in the Middle East conflict. I mean, yeah, by Hezbollah. This is a problem with Donald Trump. He doesn't actually know a stuff a lot about these things. I mean, one of my hopes with him, I mean, it was a no-brainer. He, Kamala Harris, he was the better option. But I always knew he'd be terrible on Ukraine, and he has been. But I thought he'd be strong on Israel, and you know, pick a side at that point. He's been very, very supportive of Israel. We've really, I think that has been really important for the West, and especially when Europe has been falling away from Israel. Europe has done to Israel what America has done to Ukraine, and they both shame on both sides. I mean, the abject failings of this Iran conflict in terms of actual achieving any of the key war aims, stopping Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, getting to a situation where they can control the Strait of Hormuz at drop of a hat any time they want, charge tolls and the like. We are in a much worse case scenario. But if he's, again, these fallings out with Israel and this complete lack of understanding of the threat that Israel faces from Hezbollah, and they're not attacking Lebanon, they're attacking Hezbollah, which has basically it's basically like a sort of a weed that has taken over Lebanon. The Lebanese people would like Hezbollah gone.
No, I was actually in Israel last week, and we went up to the Lebanon border, and they were just pointing out how close these armaments used to be. They were so close that sometimes Hezbollah would fire rockets into the north of Israel, and the sirens would sound after the rockets had landed, because they're so close. It's literally, you know, just right above the village that it would be targeting. And 60,000
Israelis having to be moved from their homes?
Exactly, many of whom have never returned home.
Isn't that some sort of social cleansing or genocide, according to the pro-Palestinians?
No, it isn't when the other side.
Oh, sorry, I did not get.
It's in international law somewhere, I'm told, but that's basically.
I do get confused.
How it works, and the reason that Israel went back into southern Lebanon is they didn't wake up one morning and think we'd like to take that territory. They did it because of the fact that, despite all the UN resolutions, despite what UNIFIL was supposed to do, despite all of the previous agreements which had been made and not kept to, southern Lebanon was being used as a base of operations for Hezbollah to menace Israel. And whilst that might have been slightly more tolerable before October the 7th, when they weren't firing rockets day after day after day, it became intolerable on October the 8th when they started to join in the pogrom, at least from the skies. So at the very least, that needs to be taken into account. I think with Donald Trump, he's lost interest as much as anything else. It's no longer accords with what it is that he's after.
But he's also got the midterms. He's got that cost of gas to fill up your car in America, and this is the thing. The West has basically said, yeah, you know, we as a people, we are not willing to put up with any cost whatsoever to do the right thing and to go for the long term. We are absolutely going to be unable to defend ourselves, not willing to stop some welfare costs or give up on other things in return for which getting the defence spending here. The reason why Keir Starmer hasn't done it is that actually people talk a good game. It's not actually popular to spend billions more on defence, even though those billions more on defence will save us money in the long term and prevent us from going to war and protect our economic interests, which will, again, stop costs like the Iran conflict and the Ukrainian conflict, hugely impacting our day-to-day cost of living. But the West has basically said, our politicians and the public basically said, we're not willing to pay a cost.
But there's such thing as...
You can't stand up to dictators if you're not willing to pay a cost.
There is such thing as leadership, though, and I think in the same way that, you know, after the financial crisis, there were various measures and amounts by the Conservatives which could have been quite unpopular, but a case was made, persuasively it seems, to the country that XYZ
austerity. And by the way, the Tories were in coalition, and then after doing it, people say austerity was so unpopular, they were elected as a majority government in 2015. That's what you need to know. People got it.
Yeah, exactly. And you can convince people, you can change their minds. And it's entirely plausible in this day and age with all the rising threats that you could have someone who could stand up and say, look, the way in which we've been working no longer is fit for this era. We need to...
Things have got to change.
Things have got to change. And also, you know what, it's probably not a good thing that, you know, vast ways of the country are, you know, stuck on welfare rather than working anyway. This is a win-win. There's all sorts of
but a leader, someone who could lead. Keir Starmer is not that man. I don't think Andy Burnham is, to be honest with you. Nothing from the he said so far. I'm not quite sure, but you need someone who's going to say, seriously, this doesn't work. We're going to have to tear up everything and start again in terms of what we can spend money on. I mean, I literally would tip 2 million people off benefits tomorrow. I really would. Sorry, you're working. And when you're hungry enough, you will somehow find work. But there we are. But, I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, Donald Trump... I mean, Ukraine, another big issue. We are dealing with this issue. This is extraordinary. He said, Russia should make a deal with Ukraine. I mean, the man is a walking story, board. Russia should make a deal with Ukraine, he said. I spoke with Putin on Sunday. That's never a good thing. Whenever he speaks to Putin, that's never a good thing. Getting his instructions. I mean, I'm sorry, but he worships Putin in the most bizarre way. Putin has him around his little finger. I say... There's lots of things that Donald Trump... I do not have Trump derangement syndrome at all. I accept the fact, when I was saying, if I would have voted for him, I would accept it. He was going to be rubbish on Ukraine. But I thought, Europeans would step up more than they've done. They've done a bit, but not enough. But Putin has him around his little finger. He says, I spoke with Putin on Sunday, and the same thing. They just keep on fighting. I've settled 8 wars. Have you? I thought this was going to be the easiest one to settle. Again, laughable. A lot of dislike between the two leaders. Yeah, the funny thing is, you are going to dislike somebody who's invaded your country, raped, murdered, pillaged. I mean, your Ukrainian people. I mean, the funny thing is that does happen. It is bizarre sometimes, his talk about this. And again, it's just like a... he said, she said, as opposed to a sovereign state has invaded another sovereign state. There is no question of who is the predator, and who's the victim. It is just bizarre. But I mean, we're told Keir Starmer's going to be announcing this new Russian shadow fleet set of sanctions. I was saying earlier, why there are any sanctions left to impose on Russia is absurd. Why we are accepting oil that has been drilled in Russia, not allowed to be sold to the West, but is sold to India, and then we buy it after it's been refined in India, and that's going to be absolutely fine, so we can keep some of our oil costs down. That's insane. I mean, that is properly insane that we and numerous other European countries are doing that. We are not a serious country.
Yeah, and this conflict, Russia-Ukraine, but also the other ones that have sprung up recently, I think it reminded us that particularly Europe, but large portions of the West as well, because we have no real military muscle, all we have is rhetoric, sentiments and sanctions packages, but sanctions packages which are often kind of broadly ineffective and their own forms of virtue signalling. I mean, you see it perfectly, as you say, with the ease with which just via the kind of India loophole people are still able to buy Russian fossil fuels, and also in the fact, and you have to keep reminding people of this, that the European powers, despite constantly wrapping themselves in the colour of Ukraine, have continued to buy Russian fossil fuels at a higher rate than they're giving military aid to the country that they're supposedly standing with. So there is just so... I mean, it's one thing about Donald Trump and his approach to Russia-Ukraine. It was maddening in many ways, but at the very least, you kind of know what you're getting. He's always been quite Ukraine sceptical. He's always had a bit of a warm feeling, shall we say, for Vladimir Putin for reasons that we might speculate about. But at least he's not two-faced about it. I mean, that's the one thing about the EU. You know, they smile, but then they hold
I mean,
back
God, if I was Zelensky, just the having to go through the motions of all of this. Just to let you know, the Lords Defence Committee, the House of Lords got their own defence committee as well as the Commons one. They're currently talking to Lord Robertson, the former NATO Secretary General, and of course also he's also a former Defence Secretary for Labour under Blair. But they've also got the Chief of the Defence Staff, Sir Richard Knighton. He is speaking now. No, we know that we know that he has written a letter. We've not seen the letter, but a letter that he wrote to the Prime Minister, again, ahead of the resignation of John Healey as Defence Secretary last week, expressing concern about the lack of funding for defence, the lack of funding which led to John Healey's resignation last week. And Sir Richard Knight has just warned that the armed forces here in Britain will have to, in his words, dial back exercise and operational activity if the level of funding does not increase. We're not even going to be able to do exercises. I mean, this reminds me of when Ursula von der Leyen, before she was a failed EU Commission president, she was a failed German defence minister. And while she was defence minister, the German army was so underfunded that they had to go on an operational exercise and they had to use, I'm not joking, broom handles instead of guns. That's the territory we're going to be in at this point. We're not a serious country. I mean, again, the Prime Minister talks good talk. He wants to be out. He was going to be on the red carpet. He's going to be the big I am, shaking hands, lots of big man hugs with Zelensky. But actually, we can't do anything to help them. I mean, it's bizarre. Let's go on to this bizarre situation of Russia being behind firebombing of a house, a flat and a car linked to Keir Starmer after we had a Ukrainian man, a Romanian man convicted, another third man was not convicted of basically a conspiracy for these arson attacks. One of them being a model. I think the other one also had done some modelling. Turns out they were paid by a diplomat, a 23-year-old diplomat who styled himself on the Telegram social media as L Money. Gotta love that. His initials were EL. But linked, the son of a high-ranking diplomat as well. I mean, it's a bizarre story. Certainly on social media, when we put out the question about this, no one's having any of it, saying this is all rubbish. This is not something that's been put out by Number 10. This is the BBC. Starmer has been studiously quiet about this. But we've had those Russian rent boy rumours going around massively. Got those photographs of these relatively attractive young men, and everyone's basically saying, oh, there you go, Keir Starmer's secretly gay and he's seeing gay rent boys. I mean, that's what's been... I mean, it's all over social media. People say... I spoke to senior people who involved in security very early on this. It was definitely Russians behind. This is something that's been well known, that Russians are behind. Of course, before the court case and the conviction yesterday, people not being able to talk about it. BBC have done a very extensive investigation, very clear, that this is what's going on. But a lot of people are like, what on earth is going on? Why would they be having two guys who were hired, paid a couple of grand here and there to do these arson attacks on homes where the Prime Minister, everyone knows, doesn't live at?
There is that. I mean, I suppose this is one of the things that makes it a bit confusing for people because it's such an odd story. But at the same time, it's not that odd because if you think about what we've seen with rising anti-Semitism in this country, where you had arson attacks on synagogues or on the Hatzalah ambulances or whatever, and the finger pointed at the Islamic Republic for basically trying to pick up petty criminals across Western countries, paying them, via Telegram and cryptocurrencies and what have you, to commit these attacks, sometimes out of a political motivation as well. In the case of the Romanian and Ukrainians who have been convicted here, it seems like they were just doing it at sort of hired hands. This is a form of, again, intervention, low-level warfare, intimidation, trying to gin up certain Western states and polarise them that various countries have certainly been practising. People can look at the BBC report for themselves and judge how convincing they reckon it is, but at the same time, it's at the very least not implausible that something like this would happen, not least because we've seen so many cases of the Russian state in a kind of arm's-length fashion trying to do things like this before. I think the issue with blame Russia for everything, the sort of Russiagate scandal in America, saying that Trump wouldn't have been elected were it not for all those Russian bots and whatnot, it's not necessary to say that like Russia is blameless in all these situations. It's just that there is so much over-claiming. You know, they might get up to certain things online. It's often sort of pathetic troll farms, to be perfectly frank. And then Democrats who can't understand why Trump won are like, well, that must be the reason.
Yeah, well, they didn't know anyone who would vote for Trump, so it couldn't have been happening.
So you blame it on Russia. But the idea that Russia are not up to some stuff, and the idea that Russia do not have some malign intent.
They did not decide the American elections. They did not decide the Brexit referendum, any of that. But they are up to stuff. We know that. Same as the Chinese, we know this stuff. I mean, we're going to talk to David Davis in a few moments.
To be perfectly frank, Western security forces are often up to some stuff, but at the same time, not to make a moral equivalence between the two, but people who are just, I understand, weary of the blame Russia defence in recent years. I get that. But let's not be naive either about what it is that the Russian state
I've got a number of calls coming in on social media. Just on that, just very briefly, Apple and Google, who make Android phones and iPhones, all the way around, obviously, they're going to be forced to check ID on phones over this social media ban. We're looking at sort of this, Liz Kendall was saying this is about, she wants age verification by October, although they don't want to bring this law in on banning under 16s from social media until the next spring. They wouldn't be able to do that. But, I mean, again, there's massive issues for adults. Like, why are we all being brought in? If you're going to ask for a 15-year-old's ID to show what their age is, you're going to need an 18-year-old's or 25-year-old's. There's no doubt at all in my mind, whenever any government says they're doing something for safety, you should immediately have your little spidey senses going, is it about my safety? Well, is that why you're putting my kid in a mask for 8 hours a day? You absolute... can't even use the word, and you know the word I mean. You know the word. I will never... Genuinely, I still want people to be convicted of this. I really do. The fact that these are the same people, I know they're not in government, but they were supporting all this stuff and calling for this stuff, who are saying, now we're going to keep our kids safe from social media. I don't want kids on social media all the time. I don't see why any why any primary school kid's got a phone at all. You can't leave. If you can't leave your child legally alone, right, your child doesn't need a phone. My child got a phone. She got a brick phone, so she could text. We were a little bit. She could text us when she got to school, and that was it. We could leave a message when she was coming home. That was it. That was all it was allowed. But as a parent, I can see far too many children on phones. Do you think that whatever they're planning, even leaving aside the issues in terms of our personal freedom and digital ID by the back door, that this will make a blind bit of difference?
I think it certainly will make a bit of difference. I think sometimes there's a bit of overclaiming from critics of moves like this. It's like, it's pointless.
All the kids are going around the dark web.
They all know their way around VPNs. There's obviously going to be a non-negligible proportion of them who do just completely ignore it. It will have effects around the edges. And the argument, interestingly, that the government are making now is that this isn't about the kids who are 14, 15 on social media now, but the ones who are 9, 10, 11, 12 will never get the chance to become so digitally native in that sort of world. So it's a slightly different argument they're making. All that being said, is it a good idea? No, for all the reasons that you've said, in terms of it's basically going to create a situation where everyone has to play the internet on the PG speed unless they upload all of their personal data to prove their age and identity. There is also the point when you're talking about particularly the most dangerous forms of potential online exploitation, it's not obvious that that will be completely done away with via these kinds of measures, because there is the dark web. You're arguably pushing kids more towards
regulation
dodgy sites by doing that. And there's also just the point about parenting. Parents should be able to set boundaries. And also social media. There are all kinds of bad things about it, obviously. People see that in their own habits as adults.
A million bad things about it.
At the same time, there are also perfectly good things. Banning YouTube for under 15s, you can spend hours upon hours watching absolute dross. You could also get tremendous amount of enjoyment.
I learned how to unplug a toilet. I mean, genuinely. No, I'm saying, there's some useful stuff.
If you want your 14-year-old to be able to unblock your toilet, you need to allow them to watch YouTube. How else are they going to figure it out?
Really good trick involving a plastic bag, the kind of plastic bag you're not allowed to buy anymore, but it does work. Just saying. If you want, I can do my own YouTube video on that. But you wouldn't be able to see it. Also, the nonsense.
We should get people to call in with their best techniques.
Your best technique. No, genuinely, it was an absolute revelation. But the main thing also, you've got this ridiculous situation under this government where they think that someone who is 15 years and 364 days old cannot be trusted at all with seeing, social media at all. But the next day, absolutely should decide who should run the government of this country.
Makes perfect sense.
That's madness. By the way, Keir Starmer has just been giving a statement at the G7 summit, asked about the convictions for those arson attacks on his homes and car. I'm going to do it. I haven't heard it, obviously, because I've been on air. I'm going to try and give it full justice of Keir Starmer giving one of his very interesting quotes. Justice has been done, and I'm pleased in that respect, particularly for my family who were affected by it. For the love of God, man, go. I've only got the patience to cope with you as our Prime Minister for a few more weeks, and then I'm done. I just go.
Yeah, resign.
and
spend more time with your red boys.
He said that, not me. This is the thing. Come on. But anyway, I just can't bear him. It's really weird having so much animosity towards someone who is so bland.
It's a daily insult on the eardrums, and of course they weren't red boys, as we know, because that would be uncharacteristically interesting.
That would make him. He's not interesting. 11:27 is the time. We're going to get to your calls. Give us a call. 0344 Stop making me laugh. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to have your say, whatever you want to talk about. This is Talk.
Violence on the streets, there's no excuse for that, and if there are protests following this, I just hope that they remain non-violent. I mean, you can understand the community concerns after an attack like that.
People were saying all around the world, that's what British people now think. Have a listen to Rob from yesterday.
Morning, Jez. Well, yes, rightly, you shouldn't condone what happened. What else have people got to do? The political class are not listening. These people who are coming over here illegally, they're rapists, terrorists. They're coming over here. It's literally like putting a wolf in a sheep field.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Let's get to your calls. Graham's in Liverpool. Graham, you want to talk about this social media ban? It's still really dominated a lot of the conversation, isn't it? What do you want to say?
Well, it is, Julia. Thanks for taking the call.
Thanks.
Basically, I think people have lost sight of what's happening behind the scenes. Digital ID, nobody wants it at all. So they've got to
Prime
think
Minister
of a way.
does.
And basically they've got to think of a way of bringing it in. And the way to bring it in is let's protect the kids and let's make sure everybody gets digital ID so they can go onto social media.
Yep.
Job done. I think that's all it is.
Yep.
The simplest thing is, you hit the nail on the head earlier on, Julie, with your kids. Kid is basically only have a brick phone where they can do text and calls up to the age of 16.
And that would be great if all the other kids in the class had that.
No, make it legal. Make it a legal requirement.
Yeah, I think that's the
make
best
it a legal
way.
Requirement.
Yeah.
And that way, if any kid gets stopped and they've got an iPhone or whatever,
the parents are committing an offence.
Yeah, parents are committing an offence. And then people say, well, OK, what happens if they get home? That's a parental issue. It's got nothing to do with the government. It's parental issue.
We don't know if they're giving their kids booze, drugs, cigarettes, allowing them to have sex at the age of 14 with their, girlfriend. We don't know any of that. We can't.
Correct.
I like that. I think that's a much, much easier thing. You can't be seen with a smartphone. End of. Nothing to discuss.
Phone, end of, and that's the end of it. And just like they can't be seen with alcohol in the street, just like they can't be seen with a cigarette.
Also, by the way, that would make it safe on the roads as well. All these kids crossing the road looking at their smartphones. Graham, I like your style. Let's just go basic, really basic stuff. The simplest ideas are often the best. Thank you for that. If only we had a bit more common sense in this government. Alan is in Cornwall. Alan, you want to have your say?
Yeah, following up on what he said, really, getting back to basics. Get back to newsprint rather than you haven't got all the Russian bots and everything else.
Yeah, buy a newspaper.
Yeah, and also it'll give those entry-level jobs for paper boys and paper girls.
Oh, remember that? Absolutely.
Yeah,
but this is the thing. I'm always horrified by people saying they get their news from TikTok. Well, you shouldn't get your news from TikTok.
Quite right. And everyone knew that different newspapers had a different bias. There was a great sketch in Yes Minister with Jim Hackett.
Yes.
When he said the Daily Mirror is read by people who think they run the country, the Guardian is read by people who think they ought to run the country, Times is read by people who actually do run the country, the Daily Mail is read by the wives of the people who
I know what you're going to say. Be careful of the language.
I will. The Financial Times is read by people who own the country. The Morning Star is read by people who think the country ought to be run by another country. And the Daily Telegraph is read by people who think it is run by another country. And some readers don't care who runs the country as long as she has big breath.
Exactly. That was one of the greatest sketches. It really was. Alan, thank you for that. Copyright, yes, Minister. 11:33 is time. I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to be talking to Conservative MP Sir David Davis. You want to stay tuned for that? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 11:34 is the time. Delighted to welcome Conservative MP Sir David Davis to the show. Good morning to you.
Good morning. I'm glad you cleaned up the language.
I'm just getting a little bit worried there. I've got the whole sketch as well. I'm sure you remember that one well as well. David, let's talk about what's going on at the G7 summit. We've got a Prime Minister whose Defence Secretary resigned only last Thursday, and his Armed Force Minister saying there's not enough money. We've got the Chief of the Defence Staff currently right now in a committee in the House of Lords saying we might not even be able to have training missions because we haven't got enough. He's busy announcing there's going to be new sanctions on the Russian shadow fleet. They're talking about support for Ukraine, wanting to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, the coalition of the willing and not able. The Prime Minister's, walking on the world stage, playing the big I am. But he's talking the talk, but he actually doesn't have the military backup to walk the walk, does he?
No, or indeed the political backup. And the hard truth is every single leader there will have been briefed on the fragility of the government and what's about to happen. So he'll have, I'm meant to be frank, zero leverage, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
And it's a sort of slightly tragic sight, to be honest, because this is the thing that many prime ministers live for. Certainly Starmer. Starmer spent, never here, care. He spent vast amounts of time out of the country in the last 2 years.
Prime ministers love doing that, don't they? It's much,
they like brushing shoulders with all the other grandees and so on. And I'm afraid under these circumstances, they'll view him with probably ill-disguised pity. Certainly they won't be paying too much attention to any long-term plans. And as you say, we are becoming, unfortunately, a diminished country because of our failure to actually do the absolute fundamentals of government, which is to protect ourselves, protect our borders, have a big enough army, have a navy that can actually sail, I mean, all these things really undermine us.
In terms of what's going to be discussed at the G7, obviously Ukraine is a big issue. Zelensky's going to be there. And they say there's more talk of more sanctions. Why there are still more sanctions to put on, or why we're not actually enforcing them, and not saying it's absolutely fine to have sanctions against Russia, but we'll import oil from Russia via India after it's been refined there, and that's fine. But it's not just Ukraine, it's also what's going on in Iran and this deal that apparently has been struck between Iran and the US. If what we're hearing is what the deal is in terms of $300 billion reconstruction for Iran, paid for by Gulf states, being allowed to keep their enriched uranium, but maybe some inspections, Strait of Hormuz reopened, but Iran saying they're going to charge a toll, we are going to end up back in a worse position than we were in February before the airstrikes began, aren't we?
That's exactly right. I mean, I was a critic of the attack, not on the grounds that Starmer put, oh, it's illegal. No, it wasn't, actually. It wasn't illegal at all. But it was just unwise. I mean, this is becoming, unfortunately, a recurrent feature of American foreign policy. And to be honest, I thought Trump had got beyond it. You know, he promised when he got elected, no more discretionary wars, no more wars of choice. And he's gone in for a war of choice, which classically hasn't been planned through. Almost everything you describe is going backwards, or everything you describe is going backwards. You know, I used to be the non-proliferation minister, so I had to know quite a lot about the way Iran's nuclear operations ran. And the truth is, unless you virtually have a sort of on-demand inspection regime anywhere in the country, you can't shut down the exercise. There is absolutely no need for the enriched uranium that they've got. It is not used for civil purposes. It's only used for military
They've
purposes.
got 60% enriched uranium. You only need 4% for a nuclear power plant. And why does a country with so much oil need a nuclear power plant?
They've basically got enough for a number of bombs. I'm not quite sure how many. I think it's single figures, but they've got enough for a number of bombs already. You know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, enough for one is too much. So it's a pathetic negotiation, frankly, by the Americans. I mean, the Gulf states are probably cursing them privately because now they've got to pay a ransom, in effect.
Yeah.
The Gulf of Hormuz, we've now actually given the Iranian regime a source of income they never realized they had before.
But also it sets a precedent for international waters. I mean, one of the points of the American Navy post the Second World War, I mean, we used to do this job previously, which is patrolling the seas, the international oceans, keeping them free for our shipping. And as an island nation that relies on a huge amount of our needs coming in via shipping, this is very crucial to us.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, you know, I suspect all of the oil majors for Britain, well, for all of Europe, will be looking elsewhere to places where they can get oil that doesn't go to the Gulf of Hormuz. I mean, Libya and places like that. I know that's already going on. Yeah. What Trump has done is sort of by accident reordered the world in favor of our enemies. And as you mentioned on Passon and all of that, including the Russians. I mean, you know, this has now ended up with what Russian sanctions actually were working now being crippled. I have to say the ones that were, because the truth be told, the British Treasury, the Americans have all turned a blind eye. And of course, their allies like the Indians have actually cooperated in evading sanctions. Sanctions haven't really bitten, and it's our fault. Collectively, the way.
Absolutely. I find it extraordinary. I mean, again, people say, well, it's dragged on, the economic hit. It wouldn't have dragged on if we'd given Ukraine the arms they need and we had instigated sanctions. The fact that there's even a conversation this many years on about more sanctions, they should have all been in very, very quickly, full stop, short, sharp hit. There would have been an economic cost. But yes, war has an economic cost. But this is much less than it would have been if we dragged it on.
A spectacular one. I mean, don't forget that we only just about paid off the price of the Second World War a decade or two ago. You know, and this is one of the arguments I find peculiar about why they're starving defence. If we don't have enough defensive investment to deter the Russians in 5 years' time, the cost will be 100 times or more. what we are failing to spend right now.
Yeah.
So the strategic stupidity, bluntly, of the West, and most particularly this government, is beyond belief. It is absolutely beyond belief.
Well, Kemi Badenoch gave a speech yesterday on a very busy news day. We didn't give it much coverage, but she said Keir Starmer should resign if he doesn't keep his word on defence. And we've already lost his Defence Secretary's Armed Forces Minister. He's under a lot of pressure. There's no doubt there's a lot of action at the moment, isn't there? There's a lot of announcements. It's all about, people say it's about his legacy. I don't think it's about his legacy. I think it's about him trying to cling on and look like an action man ahead, of course, the Makerfield by-election and what may well be a challenge to his leadership. One of the big announcements yesterday, of course, was the Prime Minister's announcement on social media. And bringing in this ban on social media for under 16s. We're told Australia Plus. Still pretty unclear about how the heck they're going to do it. A classic example of governments, and frankly, the Tories did a lot of this as well, announcing something. But, well, OK, how you don't announce it unless you're going to tell us the details of how you're going to do it. But he wanted to get that in clearly this week for obvious reasons, rushing it out. Big, big support, we're told, from parents, big support from lots of people. But then, lots of people supported digital ID until it was explained to them how that could be impacted on them. How much do do you think that we do need to have some controls on under 16s on social media? But how can we do those to protect the civil liberties of adults? And I know that's something you've been very, very keen to campaign on. Where do you draw the line between safety and freedom?
Well, I mean, the first thing to say about the whole thing is it's another tragic demonstration of a Prime Minister who's not in control. I mean, from the beginning, the Labour government and in particular Starmer have underestimated the difficulty of governing. Yeah. From the first day, and that's why they've got so many things wrong. I mean, you mentioned digital ID, but it's one of many. Jury trials, I mean, you name it. Yeah. All these things really badly thought through. They're just written for headlines and nothing else. Now, as for the social media ban, I mean, I'm not against a severe restriction, effectively a ban, on a whole series of bits of social media for under 16. Yeah. But it's got to be done in a very elegant way. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, for example, when a 15-year-old gets a phone, they ought to have to give their date of birth, and that ought to be basically hardwired into the phone. Yeah. A sort of digital ID, but actually, so the phone, as it were, knows when it passes the 16-year point. But while you're doing all that, you've also got to give a thought to something else. I mean, I have a very, very severely disabled grandchild. A huge amount of her education, which of course is very repetitive and so on, is done online. Yeah. Now you're going to lock her out, you know, and all the other disabled children like them. Yeah. Obviously, you don't want to do that. I mean, the disabled parents community around me here in my constituency is up in arms about this. So you've got to do these things and think them through carefully, you know. And unfortunately, what we're getting is a sort of hand-waving government. We want this. Yeah. I'm afraid good intentions is not enough. You've got to get it right. But this is it.
Whenever there's talk about safety, safety for children, everyone goes, "Oh yes, yes, we want to make our children safe." But again, you know, these are the. I mean, your government you fought against, and very, very, very grateful to you for doing so. You know, governments and the civil servants and everyone looking at this have the same people who thought our children were safe and were going to be made safer by putting them in masks 8 hours a day for a disease that was no risk to them. I mean, I simply and we've seen the way they monitored people like you and me. Talking about lockdown, tech companies taking people off. Like, I mean, literally before Twitter was before X was when it was Twitter. You know, if you said things like statements of fact, trans women are not women, they are men. People being like losing their accounts. I don't trust the tech companies, and I damn sight don't trust my government of any hue, even if it was one I voted for, to protect my freedom in that way. I simply don't trust them anymore.
You're talking to somebody who was cancelled for a brief while, I have to say, for talking about vaccine passports. Yeah, saying they don't work. The passports, not the vaccines. So you know, I mean, this is a recurrent problem. It's going to get worse as well. I mean, I always used to sort of comfort myself back in the sort of Blair days. If I didn't win a fight over ID cards or whatever it might be, the one last defence was the incompetence of government, that even though they had the data, they'd lose it, you know, they'd make a mess of it. Now it's not true anymore. Now we've got AI. These huge databases are going to be interpretable by anybody, government, of course, but also the ransomware player, the foreign power, the terrorist who gets your and my tax records or medical records or whatever records, movement records. All of those things will now be interpretable and therefore be weaponizable. And so we've got to be very, very, very careful of saying to the government, yeah, you're going to have this much power and no more, and you can only exercise it in this way. Your viewers may not know, for example, that in training the facial recognition cameras the police are using, they're using your and my passport photos. And your and my photos on our driving licenses. Now, I didn't sign anything when I handed over my phone and say, you can use this for what you like. But that's what's going on. And that's what the state does. So we have to be very, very strict about it. And when someone like Starmer comes out and announces this social media ban, or indeed announces digital ID, which will make our security less good, we've got to make sure he thinks it through. And I'm afraid it's a hallmark of this government. All governments are bad at it. This government is the worst I've ever seen.
So David Davis, Conservative MP, thank you very much indeed for joining. It's always good to talk to you. Tom Slater, quick response to that.
Well, I think what it really clearly shows is that we live in a much more dangerous era, not just in terms of the threats that assail us, but also
external and internal.
Exactly. And that's always the fear, isn't it? Because the fact that sometimes there are very clear and real issues in society, everything from what Russia might be getting up to online through to what kids might be getting up to online. I think the difficulty is every time the answer is more authoritarianism, every time the answer is encroaching upon our civil liberties.
Let them have more say.
Not the state doing more to protect us, but the state getting more into our lives. And I think that people are much more suspicious of that now than they were even a few years ago.
I'm really relieved that they are, I have to say. 3 million people signed that petition against digital ID, which was popular beforehand. All you need to do is just tell people what it really means, and people go, oh, there you go. 11:48's time, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to be talking about two of the most awful cases, the murder of Henry Novak and his killer basically facing a review of his sentence as too lenient, and also the horrific murder of a little baby sexually abused to death by his adopted parents. But did woke mean, actually, that this child died when he could have been saved? We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Got some
violence on the streets. There's no excuse for that. And if there are protests following this, I just hope that they remain non-violent. I mean, you can understand the community concerns after an attack like that.
People were saying all around the world, that's what British people now think. Have a listen to Rob from yesterday.
Morning, Jez. Well, yes, rightly, you shouldn't condone what happened. What else have people got to do? The political class are not listening. These people who are coming over here illegally, they're rapists, terrorists. They're coming over here. It's literally like putting a wall in a sheep field.
We've got some
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:50 is the time. Let's speak right now to Sir Michael Ellis, KC. He's a barrister and a former Attorney General. Good morning to you, Sir Michael.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. I wish I was talking to you under happy circumstances. I think we usually aren't talking under happy circumstances, given your former role. So I just want to talk first of all about Henry Novak's killer.
Yes.
And basically his murderer, Vikram Digwa. Of course, we're talking so much about this awful case, being stabbed 5 times after just an altercation on the street. He's been given a life sentence, but a 21-year minimum. And that has been referred to the Court of Appeal by the Solicitor General, Ellie Reeves, saying she was horrified by the case and thought it was unduly lenient. I don't want to. I mean, I don't know whether I'm in a minority on this or not. I thought it was. I don't think it's unduly harsh. I'm happy for him to go away till the day he dies. I think we should do more cases like that for cold-blooded murders like this. But is 21 years unduly lenient? I was surprised that he got such a long minimum term.
Well, it might actually be unduly lenient, and certainly the Solicitor General has come to the determination that there is an arguable case, and she will have done that with the assistance of experienced specialist sentencing lawyers who will have advised when making reference to other cases. You see, Julia, the way it tends to work is with murder cases, there is an automatic life sentence. Yeah. But what varies is what's called the tariff, and that is what the minimum sentence of years will be.
But it can be under 10 years, can't it?
In theory, it can be, but that would be a wholly exceptional case. Yeah. So there are basically 4 categories. There's the whole life sentence, where you literally spend the rest of your life. There's exceptional cases like terrorist mass murder and things of that sort. But then you have the 30-year starting point, the 25-year starting point, and the 15-year starting point.
Why not life? I mean, when they got rid of the death penalty, and I don't approve of the death penalty, I don't think state murder is a good thing. There's no evidence it deters, etc., etc. But what the part of the deal with the public was, you know, if you commit heinous crimes like this, and this absolutely was, and the callous lies, and all, you know, and all the evidence that we've got, there's no question of debate. Well, you know, could he have been wrongly convicted or anything? I think the public were of the view that people would go to prison until the day they died. Well, that's what life means. Otherwise, why are we calling it life?
Well, they do technically get a life sentence, which means that they are on parole even when released for the rest of their natural life.
But they're still on the streets.
They can be recalled to prison, including for quite minimal reasons, after their release, if they have cause to be recalled. So in that sense, yes, but there were obviously a whole range of sentencing options available. In this particular, in the Novak's case, the controversy appears to be around the starting point that the judge set. So he set a starting point of 15 years, where there is an argument that he could have set the starting point at 25 years because of the presence of the knife.
Yeah. OK. Well, we'll see what happens there. Again, I have to say, I did not think that was the greatest use of the court's time. But again, I haven't lost a son in that case. I'm sure the parents feel very differently. I want to talk about another horrific case. This is the sort of story you just go, I don't know if I want to know the details, and I will spare people too much the detail. But this is baby Preston Davey. He was 13 months old when he died at the hands of Jamie Varley. He's a secondary school teacher. He was found guilty of basically sexually abusing his adopted baby he was adopting to death. It is as simple as that. He suffocated during sexual abuse as a little baby. His partner, John McGowan Fazakeli, a sales manager, he was also convicted of charges including causing and allowing the death and jointly participating in sexual assault. The details are just too disgusting and harrowing. But I mean, again, not in favour of the death penalty. Would be happy to make an exception. There is a real concern about this case where there were 8 opportunities when the baby could perhaps have been saved. A big concern that this is an example of DEI and the woke views of the social workers and others, that they were a gay couple, they got given a baby, a healthy, happy baby whose sister had been adopted by the grandmother. We haven't got any information about what happened to the mother, but the grandmother just needed a little bit more time to be able to adopt the second baby, the second child. clearly keeping the siblings together should have been a priority, and keeping them within the family unit should have been a priority. I know loads of people who've heterosexual, happily married, long married couples who've desperate to adopt. There have been no healthy new babies offered to them. Why this couple were given this baby? Why, when the baby appeared within weeks to be pale, withdrawn, clearly suffering, taken to hospital numerous times with bruising and the like, why social services didn't step in? Does this suggest to you there may have been an attitude that, well, they're a gay couple and we approve of gay couples adopting, we're all being woke and progressive, we don't want to think the worst?
Well, apparently, Julia, there are concerns within the family of the deceased baby who feel that that may have happened. But of course, we just don't know. And I think it's obviously important to bear in mind that many of these social workers and medical professionals will have tried their very best and will have cared deeply about what has happened and be very traumatized themselves about what happened. Nobody would ever want this awful case to have occurred, and it's an absolutely horrific case. But there are always questions after episodes like this as to whether more could have been done and more should have been noticed, and whether this falls into the category of one of those cases. And there's no doubt that there have been examples of situations in our society where perhaps there's been concern that if somebody said something, they would be accused of racism or sexism or something of that.
Or homophobia in this case.
Something of that sort. So we just don't know whether that applies in this case. But if it's true that there were multiple episodes where things were missed, then clearly the authorities need to look into that, because lessons have to be learned about making sure we're trying to make sure that this sort of horrific case doesn't happen again. And
lessons learned. How many times have we heard that?
Well, I know, but this is, the reality is that it's a societal flaw where people feel, if people do feel, they can't say something because they're going to be accused of being, inappropriate.
Well, exactly. I absolutely want gay couples, both lesbians and gay men, to be able to adopt a loving family. Any family is better than the family. When kids are taken away, need to be up for adoption, they need another family. That's the best thing for them. But if the rules are going to be the same, but they've also got to have the same standards and expectations in terms of how when the baby is clearly not thriving, looking in more closely. And there were numerous evidence points where they were trying to withhold the child from being seen by social services. We had that with the Baby P case as well. That's a clear, big, red neon sign that something is going wrong.
And as you say, there are many obstacles and bureaucratic hurdles for people who want to adopt children to jump before they can do so. And one would hope that amongst all of this paperwork and amongst all of these bureaucratic hurdles, if there are people who cannot adopt children because they can't jump those bureaucratic obviously it is so much better for children not to be in...
Absolutely. All I can tell you, people, if you supported Brexit or if you vote Reform or anything, I'm telling you, you won't be approved to adopt a child. I'll tell you that right now. That is absolutely what's going on. So, Michael Ellis, Casey, so appreciate you joining us. Coming up, we are going to get the latest headlines. We're going to be talking more with Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, and we're going to be joined in the studio by the former head of the British Army, Lord Dannett, to make what he thinks about what's going on at the G7 summit, our defence spending. Can we even defend our own country? We'll take your calls as well. Get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Lots of calls still coming on social media. And indeed, that arson attack on Keir Starmer's home. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense with me. And you can listen on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker. You can watch on YouTube or your connection device. However you do it, great to have your company. If you missed anything from the show already, why would you do that? Go to my YouTube page, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe. With you till 1 o'clock. Joining me still in the studios, editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater. Any moment now, we're going to be welcoming Lord Dannatt, the former head of the British Army. Quite a lot to talk to him about. He's going to be live in the studio. A lot going on at home and abroad. A lot of you still calling in about the social media and loads of calls on that yesterday when that was first formally announced by the Prime Minister. There was still, let's face it, all pretty unclear about how the hell it's supposed to work and also the implications for your and my freedoms as adults. Going to obviously be talking more about what's going on at the G7 in terms of the Iran conflict, in terms of Ukraine. Also this investigation that found arson attacks targeting Keir Starmer, his homes and his car were part of a sabotage campaign by the Russian state. Also, the Tories announced they want to strip judges of their powers to rule on migrants' appeals against deportation. I mean, absolutely in favour of that. And a biographer of Winston Churchill has accused the National Portrait Gallery of a barefaced lie over their claim in an artwork that the wartime Prime Minister deliberately starved Indians. I mean, is there any claim against Winston Churchill that will not be made these days? Tom Slater, as I say, is here. Won't talk about that right now. We're going to talk about that a little later in the show. But there's no doubt at all what's going on foreign affairs is really dominating a lot of the bandwidth. So a lot of these leaders at the G7 summit at Evian-les-Bains it's in France, on the shores of Lake Geneva. They're always at fabulous places, aren't they? And we know that all these leaders, I mean, you've got the German leader, Friedrich Merz. I mean, he's very unpopular at home. I'm surprised by this. He seems to be a pretty sensible fellow, if you ask me. Certainly Emmanuel Macron, absolutely loathed by the vast majority of French people. Donald Trump, his popularity ratings not very good at all. Certainly Keir Starmer's aren't. No one even thinks Keir Starmer's going to realistically be in his job in a few weeks or months' time, depending on events later this week. But they all love strutting the world stage. They love getting on that red carpet, standing in front of a flag, looking all busy and important, discussing the world. Do any of these summits get anything done, though?
It's not that they can't. It's that I think we're just lumbered with a set of leaders across the piece, really, who are, for all kinds of different reasons, weak, unable to properly follow through on their supposed commitments, and given to using these summits as basically grand exercises in virtue signalling rather than anything particularly substantive. And I think particularly with the rising geopolitical temperature, what has become clear time and time again is that because Western European states in particular have so weakened themselves, have allowed their defences to wither on the vine, that, warm words and statements and communicators is really all they can do, particularly when they haven't shown sufficient intention to properly make themselves serious military powers again. So, and
it's not just us. I mean, they have to rely on Poland and Finland to protect Europe at the current time because they're actually taking it seriously because they've actually got borders with Russia. And
it's not to say that diplomacy and summits are unimportant. I think they become unimportant when it becomes just about posturing and sort of shadow play.
I mean, this is the thing. I mean, one thing about what's going on in Ukraine is we've got Donald Trump saying he thought this was his issued statement this morning. So he thought this would be the easiest war to end. He spoke to Putin on Sunday. Never a good thing. I'm basically saying they should do a deal. But if the deal is basically that, I mean, Russia's still demanding that they get even more territory than they've actually managed to conquer. I'm not sure that's how wars end when you haven't actually, 4 years on, you haven't actually managed to take more than 20% of a country. But, I mean, just completely unreasonable. But then we're in this particular situation where Donald Trump's basically saying he doesn't care about Ukraine. We know that, and we knew that before he was elected. But extraordinarily, the Europeans, as you said earlier, they profess to care. And yes, we're spending vast amounts of our taxpayers' money buying weaponry from us, US. We have to buy weaponry from the US because we don't have any ourselves to give to the Ukrainians. At the same time, as you've pointed out, buying their sanctioned oil, Russian sanctioned oil, giving them the money to buy their weaponry. I mean, this is genuinely madhouse territory, isn't it? And at the same time as the Prime Minister, I mean, it was very interesting, wasn't it, after the Defence Secretary resigned last week, saying there's not enough money, we can't defend our country. Suddenly we get the storming of this Russian shadow tanker. We're told that they're going to have more sanctions on those shadow tankers. But, you know, if there'd been, as there previously have been, a Russian warship escorting these tankers through the channel, there's no way our forces would have stormed. We wouldn't have been able to take them on. I mean, it's an absolute joke. And at the same time, he has allowed in the last few months, it's OK for us to buy oil that has been refined in India, which has come from Russia. We are literally aiding both sides of the war, and at a huge cost to the British ordinary person going about their day, trying to fill up their car, heat their home and buy goods that cost God knows how much more because of the extra energy costs. I mean, do they know what... I mean, do they have a clue what they're doing?
Obviously not. I mean, this is one of the things that has been pretty obvious throughout the whole Ukraine war, the invasion of Ukraine, is that you've got a lot of Western governments who kind of engage in like sabre rattling, but without a sabre, like they don't really have anything to back it up.
They're sort of clanking on something, you know.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, they would just they would do so in the knowledge that you had NATO underpinned by the US, and they could kind of hide behind the big one in the group, as it were, whenever things would get a little bit heated. Now, given Donald Trump is back in office, given his scepticism towards Ukraine, his scepticism towards NATO, or at least America's
even towards
side
Israel
of
at the moment.
Exactly. That's no longer true. So, Donald Trump, I think, should rightly be criticised for how he's approached many of these conflicts. But at the same time, there is a consistency, and there is a way in which he has called the bluff of various European states who have liked to give it the big one at various points in relation to Russia
he's done
and
us a
Ukraine,
favour.
but have zero to back it up.
He's done us a favour. The trouble is, our Prime Minister isn't listening. That's why he lost the Defence Secretary last week. It's why Kemi Badenoch called for him to resign. Cannot wait to get the thoughts of Lord Richard Dannett on this. And we've had, earlier today, we've had the Lord's Defence Committee in a question and answer session with Sir Richard Knighton, Richard, I think his name's, the Chief of Defence Staff. And there he is saying basically they're going to have to limit exercises. Because and operational activity if the level of funding does not increase. I mean, this is a joke. We could be... Even the Prime Minister at the Munich Security Conference a few weeks ago told NATO leaders that our British security and intelligence services think that we could face a proper full-on attack from Russia in 2030. I mean, it's 2026. We're halfway through 2026. Do you know, you don't just buy weaponry off the back off the shelf.
Yeah, stick in an order and then it will be
I mean, and we're not even able to do exercise. I mean, people should be taking this more seriously. Why do you think so many in the public don't? And I know people criticise the Prime Minister. A lot of people have been, look, we've been talking about it. Most of the people we have on this show have been talking about it because people who are paying even the vaguest amount of attention are taking it seriously. Why on earth would you not, as a Prime Minister, take these warnings seriously when they are coming from anyone and everyone, and even Lord Robertson, the man who wrote your own Strategic Defence Review?
I also think there is a fair amount of political space, if he wanted to take it, to make the argument that this is crucially important, and it also goes hand in hand with dealing with, in search of that money, we will also have to deal with some pretty deep fiscal and social problems that we should have dealt with anyway. Yeah. It is also a moral horror show that there are so many people across the country who have been put out to pasture on sickness benefit, disability benefit, people who a blink of an eye ago would not have been considered long-term sick or disabled, to be perfectly frank. So there is a space to make that argument. I think the difficulty with Keir Starmer is that he is always in conversation with his own party and his own backbenchers. Yeah. They hold the whip hand. In terms of the voters,
they don't get it.
I think voters are persuadable on these questions. They know that not everything is about the short-term kind of money in your pocket or any disruption to services as they currently exist. People are pretty switched on about the way in which the world is changing. The problem is the Labour Party, particularly the backbenchers, who continue to just sort of live in a sort of roughly sort of 90s haze and think that nothing has really changed and it should just all be back to
Yeah, well, good luck with that. Good luck with that when your sons and daughters are being conscripted to fight. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's the reality. Let me give out the numbers to get in touch, because lots of people are getting in touch. Still, actually, a lot of calls on the social media ban, understandably, because this is going to impact, every family. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000 while you're still allowed to have a phone. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X @talkTV. Calls are charge the national rate, text cost 1, standard network rate message. Let's get in another call before we go to a break, and then we'll be talking to the head of the British Army, Lord Dannett. Paul is in Cardiff. Paul, good morning to you. No, good afternoon, apologies.
Hello, Julia.
You want to talk about this social media ban, don't you? I mean, this has dominated the news, I mean, for quite a long time, but we finally got some detail yesterday, but some of it seems to have changed today, so I still haven't got a clue how they're actually planning to do this.
Saying one thing and doing is a completely different thing, but then Keir Starmer seems quite good at that.
Yeah. Yes.
And they think kids out there are absolutely stupid. Some of them are so savvy, they're going to find a way around it.
As they have done in Australia. Well, in Australia, I understand, the social media companies weren't required to basically cancel all the accounts or make them verified to continue their accounts, so they just didn't bother. But this is the thing, your average 12-year-old knows how to work their phone better than the average parent. It's as simple as that. Yeah. What did you think of the idea from a caller a little bit earlier, which I thought was a damn sensible idea, which is basically say, till the age of 16, you're not allowed to have a smartphone, and parents will be prosecuted if their child has a smartphone. Yeah. OK, you can't... I don't want them turning up at people's homes, but realistically, you know, they're not allowed to walk in the street with it. That would be a culture change, and that would be really simple, wouldn't it?
The old brick phone they all have.
They can still message their mates.
Yeah, because some of the things that you can get online are quite well.
Oh, no, it's terrifying what they're seeing online, mate.
Yeah,
no, I mean, I do think a lot of parents haven't got a clue what their kids are doing online. They haven't got a clue what their kids are doing when they're outside their home, but they definitely don't know what they're doing online, and they are seeing horrific stuff. We were talking to parents the other night. They're all absolutely convinced, well, my kid doesn't do that. My kid doesn't drink. My kid's never dabbled in drugs. My kid doesn't look at porn. I hate to tell you, your kid's 1 in a million then.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I was listening this morning, and it went to one school, and the reporter said, well, with all this extra time you'll have now, what will you do?
I saw that.
And she said, I'll stare at the wall.
She was actually being wonderfully sulky, I have to say, and I like that. But again, they don't know what else to do. And the reason they don't is because parents have used phones as technological babysitters for the last 10 years. Paul, thank you for that call. He reckons the kids are going to get around it. I think they will. It's the adults who are going to struggle. Also, we're going to struggle when, of course, they are impinging on our freedoms by requiring us to show exactly who we are every time we log on. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, we are going to be talking to the former head of the British Army, Lord Dannett, live in the studio. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
Breaking news.
Violence on the streets, there's no excuse for that, and if there are protests following this, I just hope that they remain non-violent. I mean, you can understand the community concerns after an attack like that.
People were saying all around the world, that's what British people now think. Have a listen to Rob from yesterday.
Morning, Jez. Well, yes, rightly, you shouldn't condone what happened. What else have people got to do? The political class are not listening. These people who are coming over here illegally, they're rapists, terrorists. They're coming over here. It's literally like putting a wolf in a sheep field.
We've got...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. The time is at 12:16. Still in the studio with me is the editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater. Delighted to be joined right now by Lord Dannatt, former head of the British Army as well. A very good afternoon to you, sir.
Really good afternoon.
Not like defence is much in the news at the moment. Just, I suppose, I just want to go back just to last Thursday first. Were you surprised or shocked in any way at the news that the Defence Secretary John Healey resigned, and followed then very quickly by his Armed Forces Minister, Al Khans?
I was shocked as to the timing, but not surprised as to the issue. John Healey, very considered man, a very good minister, understands the issues as far as defence is concerned extremely well, and had been arguing the case with the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, making it quite clear that more money needs to go into defence, and actually trying to hold the Prime Minister to what he said at the Munich Security Conference in February, that we, by 2029, would increase defence expenditure to 3%. So I think John Healey felt he really had reached the end of the tether, and by resigning himself, probably the last wake-up call. Yep. And I think Al Khans felt he had no option but to follow his boss through the door.
And the new Defence Secretary, Dan Jarvis, a lot of people were saying, well, you know, he's a former security minister, he's a former serving soldier himself, that, you know, was he going to be offered more money? At some point, there was some talk that he was going to get more money, but actually only 13.5 billion quid, of that only 10 billion is actually real new cash over the next 4 years, is on offer. It's a tiny increase, way below what even the Prime Minister's own Strategic Defence Review carried out by Lord Robertson, former Defence Secretary for Labour and a former NATO Secretary-General, someone you think probably knows what he's talking about, has said is needed. Do you think that Dan Jarvis should remain in the job as Defence Secretary, knowing what we all know about the lack of sufficient defence spending to keep this country safe?
Well, I'd like to think that Dan Jarvis, in agreeing to take the job on, had a conversation and got some commitment from the Prime Minister that there might be a small amount of additional money. If that's not the case, then I don't really know why Dan would have taken the job. However, of course, a lot of political flux potentially around what's going to happen on Thursday, who's going to be Prime Minister in a week or two or three's time, and it may be that Dan's made a calculation that, let's say, if he wins the by-election and Andy Burnham becomes Prime Minister, maybe he will find some more money for defence. Dan is a good man, and I'm quite sure that he's taken that job in a conscious decision to try and do the right thing for defence.
OK, very interesting. Well, of course, I mean, this didn't happen at a great time for the Prime Minister. So, I mean, certainly not heading, you know, into the G7 summit today. But he's been there. We know all Prime Ministers of every political hue and from every different country. They love posturing on the world stage. But he's there. He's talking about new sanctions on the Russian shadow fleet. There'll be lots of hugging of Zelensky later on about the support they want to give to Ukraine. What do you make of the fact that we are at the same time allowing sanctioned oil via India to come to be bought and used in this country to keep our energy prices down, at the same time as we are using taxpayers' money to buy weapons from America to give to Ukraine, effectively funding both sides, talking a good game about taking on Russia, but not actually, I suppose, delivering enough to actually enable Ukraine to defeat their invader?
Well, I think the optics of this, for the various reasons that you've just outlined, I don't think look good at all. But what is absolutely critical is that we do continue to stand foursquare with the Ukrainians, because it's in absolutely our interests as the United Kingdom, as a European member state, that we support Ukraine in resisting Russian aggression. Because if Putin succeeds in any shape or form, we're all going to feel the consequences. So standing foursquare with Ukraine is absolutely right, and even if that means more cash coming from here, so be it.
Because, of course, I mean, I look back, and I've mentioned this on the show in the last couple of days, you know, we were spending in 1938, and a lot of people talking about we're in 1930s territory. 1938, Neville Chamberlain still negotiating with Hitler, around 6-7% of GDP was being spent on our defences, even though more than double what it is right now. But a few years later, it was 50%. The costs of actual hot war are rather more than preparing for one.
Julia, you're absolutely right. You're playing back the figures that I've used many, many times. 1935, like today, we were spending less than 3% of GDP on defence. We failed to deter or appease Hitler. In 1939, when the war broke out, it went to 19%. And in 1940, Churchill having taken over as Prime Minister, we were fighting for our survival, 46%. Those are the figures.
I think a lot of people will say, look, OK, we started talking, Ukraine, it's over there. Russia isn't going to be rolling their tanks across the channel with we're not under threat. But then we've had, numerous attacks. We've had, these tanker fleets. We've had the submarines that have been found monitoring our underwater cables, communication, gas pipelines, electrical cables, and the like. We've had, no doubt, cyber attacks. I mean, China and Iran as well. But cyber attacks. We've had this arson attack on the Prime Minister's former family home, his flat and his car. 2 men convicted, a Ukrainian and a Romanian. Yesterday, the Prime Minister has now said, justice is being done. But the BBC have issued a report, very well documented, about how actually this was all basically orchestrated by Russia. There's been a lot of rumours, you have seen them as well, about this. Well, these men were models, they were Russian rent boys, and lots of lurid rumours about the Prime Minister, also put around by the Russian bot farmers. But basically, these models were paid by a Russian diplomat who styled himself on Telegram as L Money. Wonderful, EL being his initials. So when we talk about the threat from Russia, what are we actually talking about? Are we going to have, Russia, the little green men, turning up like they did in Crimea and in Ukraine mainland? What do we actually mean by a Russian threat?
I think we mean several things. We often talk about attack under the threshold, under the radar, as it were, and those are the sort of things that you're just talking about that we're seeing all the time in the so-called grey zone. But I think what's more concerning, and I think this is what in the back of Putin's mind, he would love to test the strength of Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. He would like nothing more than to cause division in NATO and to cause NATO to fragment.
He doesn't need any help with that.
Well, I don't know. I think NATO has held together pretty well, actually, over the last few years. But to scrape Putin to the core, you've got an unreconstructed KGB colonel who, in the late 1980s, beloved Soviet Union and Warsaw Pact, disintegrated in the face of strong leadership from Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher and the unity of NATO. He would love nothing more than to fracture NATO, to be able to increase Russia's influence. Now, how would he do that? Well, let's say if there was a ceasefire in Ukraine at some point, it will give the Russians the chance to reconstitute their forces. They could go again in Ukraine, or they could decide to perhaps make a small incursion into one of the Baltic states just to test the veracity of NATO. Would we stand by Article 5? Would we stand? Would the Germans stand? Would the Americans stand? And that's what he wants to test. And that's a real danger for us and the alliance.
I think we'll fail that test. I genuinely think that NATO, with it, and again, he doesn't largely do tanks rolling in very obviously with the Russian flag. It's all done very slowly and surreptitiously and bringing in Russian speakers and the like, isn't it? But this is the thing. The Article 5, and you will know this far better than I do, but it doesn't actually require military action by NATO members to, attack on one is attack on all. It requires them to sort of, act as one and treat it as an attack on all. But it doesn't require them to, basically send the military forces to protect that nation. Realistically, I don't think Donald Trump would be there. I'm not even entirely sure that many other NATO countries would be there.
Well, I think the big thing is to take action now to make sure that our military capability is strong enough to deter further aggression. Now,
how strong does that have to be? Because Chief of the Defence Staff, Sir Richard Knighton, this morning to the Lords Defence Committee has warned the armed forces here in Britain currently, if the level of funding does not increase, we'll have to dial back exercise and operational activity. We can't even do exercise. We can't even do proper training right now.
Well, this is another symptom of the difficulties that the defence budget is in. And, all right, the over-expenditure often comes from the defence procurement, the procurement of equipment. And there's much more equipment that we actually need, particularly modern equipment such as we're seeing demonstrated on the battlefield in Ukraine today. But where savings often have to be made to try and bail out the equipment side is on the operating side. Now, this is really dangerous because soldiers, sailors, airmen and Marines, they like to do their job, they like to go and exercise, they like to train, they're professionals, they want to be at the top of their game and they need to train. But actually, when you start to cut that back just to save a relatively small amount of money to fill other holes in the defence budget, that's when you're really standing into danger. And this just underlines again, if the CDS was saying to the Defence Committee this morning that these are the challenges, it just indicates the difficulty that the MOD is in and the absolute importance of putting more money into defence. Yeah. And the Treasury has just got to wake up and do it and find it from somewhere and do it pretty quickly.
Well,
we've wasted a year already.
Indeed. Well,
since the SDR.
I mean, it was still too late and it should have been done much sooner, shouldn't it? But, I mean, 2014 should have been the wake-up call. And again, the concerns over Donald Trump, and he said in his statement today, and he's arrived at the G7 summit in Evian, saying, look, you know, I thought that the war in Ukraine would be the easiest to solve, but I spoke to Putin on Sunday, always a bad thing, and you know, and he wants them to just do a deal, but there's a lot of, you know, bad blood between these two men. I mean, yeah, we're all surprised by that, but one thing I think a lot of us who thought he was the better choice than Kamala Harris at the time of the election, although concerned about his lack of support for Ukraine, still allowing those weapons to be bought by the Europeans to help that war effort, that he would stand firm on Israel. He's now being very critical of Israel, very critical of Netanyahu. He's got this Iran deal. We haven't seen the details. We've seen different versions of it. Certainly the Iranians and the Americans seem to be saying very different things about the Strait of Hormuz and whether it's going to be fully opened. Is there going to have to be a toll? Bizarre $300 billion being provided by Gulf states, as one suggested, to basically rebuild Iran. A strange thing to ask, you know, the UAE and others to do after they've been bombed by Iran, especially as the bombing of Iran has largely been on military targets. No requirement to give up their enriched uranium, etc. I mean, are we likely to end up, whatever this deal actually finally says, in a not just back into sort of situation, you know, the same situation we were in February before the bombing started on the February 28th, but actually in a worse position?
I think the answer is probably yes, and I think the situation we could find ourselves in is certainly no better and probably worse than the position of the Obama deal done in 2015. But, you know, you started this question on Israel's position. Well, whether you approve of what Israel has done in Gaza, whether you approve of what other things that Israel does, Israel is a sovereign country that has a right to exist, and it has been under the malign influence of Iran through Hezbollah, through Hamas, through the Houthis in Yemen for many, many years. And clearly the Americans and the Israelis together had planned to reduce Iran's power at some point. They were pretty successful, although it's a very extravagant, dangerous, bloody way of taking Hamas down. Hezbollah, it seemed that they had reduced the threat from Hezbollah, but that has not gone away. And now Donald Trump, so keen to get a deal, is really shackling the Israelis from wanting to continue their attacks on Iran. So whichever way you look at it, Donald Trump hasn't really achieved very much. Probably the outcome is no better, but probably worse than where we were in 2015. Iran now knows that it can control a fifth of the world's oil supply by having its foot on the neck of the West, by controlling the Straits of Hormuz. Whichever way you look at it, Donald Trump has not done a good deal. And if he does an equally not good deal with Putin, frankly, Ukraine's in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is why we have to stand up really strongly.
And have the ability, you know, coalition of the willing but not able is no use to anybody. Realistically, if he had, I mean, I'm sure the Pentagon would have been advising this, secured the Strait of Hormuz such as that was possible before the bombing in Iran started and the taking out of the Tehran leaders. If they had done that, if they had been able to come to the table and get a deal, with the massive economic impact that we've seen and the damage, you know, and the reprisals on Gulf states, etc., would it have been worth it to prevent Iran getting a nuclear weapon? Would that cost be worth it? Because a lot of people are saying this is a war of choice. I don't personally view. I think the timing is choice. I don't personally view it as a war of choice. I think the nuclear-armed Iran is such an existential danger to the Western world that it's untenable. Do you believe that was, if the war had been operated in the correct way, that it would have been the right decision to do? To do that?
Yes, I think a strategic objective that is entirely legitimate is denying Iran a nuclear weapon. A second objective was actually denying or reducing their capability to produce and use ballistic missiles, which have been striking US bases in other Gulf states over the last little while. Well, neither of those things have been achieved at the present moment. And it's a failure of strategic understanding not to have realised just potentially how strong a position Iran was by being able to control the Straits of Hormuz. Yeah. And I think it's that which has probably brought Trump to the table, because he realises that he's adversely affected the international economy, and it's also affecting the economy back in the United States. And if he wants to make America great again, he wants people to feel better off, he's done the reverse.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a funny old thing how governments manage to do that.
It is a funny old thing. I think a lot of us are at the point where not we want military coups, but a lot of us seem to view, and it's interesting how much reverence there is to government ministers of any political party if they have served in the military, because there's a recognition you have to get the job done. You can't just talk in sound bites, you actually have to deliver, otherwise people die. It's very, very straightforward. You know, during lockdowns and COVID, it was like, right, we need something done. Right, get the army to do it. It was constant refrain, wasn't it? I think a lot of us are getting to the point where we're thinking, maybe we'd be better off if we were run by one of you guys or girls than run by the politicians. What would you do differently if you were, just say you were Prime Minister, what would you do differently?
Well, all I will say is that Dan Jarvis has got a very respected military track record, and he is now Secretary of State for Defence. So you've got a military man there. I think the really important thing is you've got to decide what your strategic objectives are, both internationally and domestically, and make a plan to achieve them.
You should start that end and then find the money.
And then work back. But then critically, as the Prime Minister, you've got to articulate what it is that you want to do. You've got to communicate well. You've got to speak to your own narrative. And then the people in the country will understand we have got a threat to our security, therefore we must spend more money. We have got a burgeoning welfare budget which is not under control, so we're going to have to do things differently. We've got to get more young people back into work. We'll make a plan to do it. But you've got to talk about these things, take the people with you, and then they'll understand, and then they will work with you.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yes.
Just thinking, wouldn't that be nice? Lord Dannett, I mean, it's absolutely fantastic to have you in the studio. I know sitting next to us, Sir Thomas Lee, listening to all that, editor of Spiked Online, I'm sure you'd like to come in briefly with your response to what he's had to say.
I was just thinking about the Donald Trump question, because I think one of the reasons that he's been, in some senses, refreshing for international affairs, he's like the child in The Emperor with No Clothes. He's pointing out, why aren't these NATO allies paying their way?
Absolutely.
Why are we so relaxed about these Islamist lunatics maybe having a nuclear weapon? Problem is, at the end of the day, he is still a child in so many ways. So actually kind of following through on any of that, I think it just shows that Western powers, if they want to be taken seriously on the world stage, but also if they're going to navigate the issues in their own national interest, they need to, notwithstanding NATO, stand on their own 2 feet.
Lord Dannett?
Well, you're absolutely right on the first of those points. European countries we've not been paying our way in terms of the collective security of Europe, and we've relied far too much on the American nuclear umbrella and on the American conventional umbrella. And the one good thing Donald Trump has done is actually saying to us Europeans, come on, you've got to spend more on your own defence.
Absolutely.
But now, Julia, we've actually got to do it.
Yeah.
There's no point talking the talk, as he did at Munich. He's got to walk the walk and put some more money on the table now, so that contracts can be let to defence industry, British industry, and of course that will all help growth as well. So we start to get into the upward cycle.
Absolutely.
Straightforward if you get on and do it.
Well, I mean, it's almost like it's really obvious to everyone who's sane and paying attention, isn't it? Lord Dannett, former head of the British Army, thank you very much. Great to have you in the studio. We're going to take a quick break. I'd love to get your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000. Up next, we are going to be talking to David Shipley, investigative journalist, about why the Tories are pledging to strip judges of their powers to prevent deportations of illegal migrants. That's up next. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show, 12:35. Thank you very much for joining us. So good to talk to Sir Richard down live in the studio. Covered a lot of ground there. And again, just talking sense. But yeah, should we call in? Should we just have a military coup? Would that be easier? Would we do better? I'm not. I mean, Tom Slater's sniggering. I'm getting to the point when the politicians keep failing us. Oh, by the way, latest very exciting news. Prince George, the child of the Prince and Princess of Wales, is going to Eton College as his school. Is he the older one? I'm assuming he's the older one.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't keep up on this. All I know is Charlotte and I share the same birthday. That's all I know. I'm older than her. A future king of this country is going to go to the poshest, most expensive school in the country. What a surprise! Mm-hmm.
No, that's a
man of the people.
But what did we expect? It's not going to send it to the local comp.
Yeah. Why not? If the local comp's good enough for other people, why not say, wouldn't that be refreshing?
No, exactly.
Wouldn't that be refreshing?
Run the risk of getting a shank, But that's still... You can't do that, can you? I mean,
that word really worried me for a moment.
I'm anti-monarchy, and even I would think that would be ridiculous. If you're going to have a monarchy, do it. Do it properly.
Do it properly. Put them in coattails and white tie.
You can't be a little bit pregnant. You shouldn't have a little bit of a monarchy in my view.
There we are. Your thoughts? Always welcome. Right, let's talk about some other stories we haven't got to yet. David Shipley, he's an investigative journalist and joins us once again to talk about various different political issues, actually. David, thank you for joining us.
This
is really interesting. The Tories got a speech today from Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary. They want to strip judges of their powers to rule on migrants' appeals against deportation. They also say they're going to quit the European Convention of Human Rights. My goodness, they got dragged kicking and screaming to that position, and scrub the judicial tribunal system that migrants use. I mean, we've got to welcome this, haven't we? We've got a completely and utterly infected judicial system on this account, and they're just letting anyone and everyone stay with on the most spurious grounds.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, of course, that Reform announced these policies before the local elections, and now we're seeing the Tories shifting as well. I think the reality is using the courts to negotiate our way through whether people can stay in the country or not maybe worked when there were a very small number of people coming.
Yeah.
Now it's just become a mechanism for making the country ungovernable. So I think this shift in making all migration matters non-judiciable is absolutely a good thing.
But also, these people are utterly captured. People often talk about, if we leave the ECHR, we leave this, but actually the people who are making these decisions are themselves utterly captured. A lot of the lawyers, certainly the NGOs, the charities, but the judges themselves. We've seen some ridiculous rulings. The Albanian guy whose son wouldn't like chicken nuggets in Albania, didn't like foreign nuggets. We've had, people, a guy convicted of paedophilia who was not allowed contact with his own children, surprisingly, without another adult present to protect his own children. But he wasn't deported so he could keep his family alive. They're not just over-interpreting or exaggerating this, Article 8, the right to a family and private life. They are completely turning it on its head, ignoring, I keep going on about this, the second paragraph of it, which means, when there's an issue of national security, criminality, etc., that overrides those rights. I mean, otherwise, anyone and everyone, mass murderers and paedophiles, can stay in the country at their will.
Yeah, and I think there's a number of factors behind this, aren't there? First of all, the people who become immigration judges have generally worked as immigration lawyers, and generally immigration lawyers are very in favour of immigration. Secondly, the whole charity nexus is often actually funded either by the state or by big foundations which are very pro-migration. There was a great report called Breaking the Blob out by a think tank called Cambridge Circus Research recently, which really looked into how this works. But the money flows often from the taxpayer to these charities, which actually sue us to prevent us from deporting people. And yes, the way the convention has been interpreted has been really twisted. One thing that always I think is shocking is the way the prohibition against inhuman treatment and torture has been grown, so that there's been cases where people have said, I can't possibly be sent back to France because I've been made destitute there. They won't house me as Britain does, and therefore that would be inhuman treatment. You can't do that to me. That's ridiculous. So of course we should be able to deport people to perfectly civilized countries next door or France. And I
love that, perfectly civilized countries next door or France.
Indeed. But, you know, of course we have to be able to do this, right? The legal system just doesn't work anymore. And I think we often make the mistake of thinking of laws as geography, as if they're just a feature of the world that we have to deal with. They're actually just tools. And when a particular set of laws no longer serves our purpose, we should discard them.
No, the laws are fine. It's the people who are supposedly interpreting them, in my view, completely and utterly distorting and perverting them because they've got their own political end, because they're all a bunch. You can't get into the judiciary now. I've got a very good friend who's a senior judge. I swear, do you know you're old when you've got friends who've become judges? And you know, and they talk about, you know, they're fairly woke themselves, but the wokery. And we've seen this recently, you know, with the Henry Novak case, haven't we, with, you know, what police officers are expected to do in terms of the jumping through hoops. You don't get to any senior role in any public sector organisation now unless you sign up to this stuff.
Yes,
open borders, you know, immigrants good.
And that applies across sort of governance as well. So if you're applying for a non-exec in any of these organisations to sit on a board, you will be asked what your attitude is to equality and diversity as part of that interview process. You know, it's a statement of faith, really.
Well, it's McCarthyite, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's clearly quite sinister. But also, I would go further to say much of this law is itself, you know, built in a way which creates these problems. I think the human rights law that we have creates a load of positive rights which are applied universally, and therefore anyone who gets here is covered by them. And that inherently must create a system where the law will not let us deport people.
Well, indeed. Well, let's talk about this. This is quite an interesting one because we've got the Reform are basically saying that they would strip Serco, it has billions in contracts with the government, of any public sector contracts if they, as Serco have said, refuse to basically act and help with deportations of illegal migrants. This is a key Reform policy, that they would deport 600,000, they say, of illegal migrants. And again, I don't know why anyone is not in favour of us deporting people with no right to be here. It won't just be boat people; it would be others as well. But basically saying, no, they will have to be deported. People are talking about an American-style ICE organisation. Of course, they wouldn't be armed; it wouldn't be the same situation. But the only reason why we have seen some horrific violence and some, you know, absolutely unacceptable behaviour from some of the officers, from ICE agents, I would say. But a lot of this has come about because local authorities and demonstrators, protesters, have been preventing them from going about their, you know, electorally mandated legal duty to go to people who have no right to be in the country and remove them. But Reform basically saying, right, if you won't play, you've got a load of contracts putting illegal migrants effectively into, you know, to houses of multiple occupancy and others. If you won't, you know, identify where people are or won't act, you won't get any government contracts. I mean, it seems reasonable to me.
I think it's perfectly reasonable. You know, the state has a duty to protect its people, and if there's a Reform government elected in 2029 with a mandate to pursue this level of mass deportations and remigration, then of course it must be able to do that. And if corporate entities, be they companies or charities or, you know, other sorts of bodies, seek to oppose that, they would be acting against the interests of the British people and against our national security. And of course the state should use its power in that situation to overrule them. And I think it's great that Zia Yusuf in this case came out now and said, look, you guys need to be on board with this or it's going to hurt.
But it is fascinating. We've got the civil service unions. They're already talking about the mass strikes and how they're going to be able to prevent a Reform government or a Reform Tory coalition, if that happens, from actually doing the things they've said they want to do. I mean, it is utterly extraordinary in a democracy that they would think that that was acceptable and to be completely open about it. But then I suppose after the Brexit referendum and the entire state working against the enacting of the biggest democratic vote for anything this country's ever voted for, I mean, we shouldn't really be surprised.
Well, exactly. I'm not surprised at all. I think, you know, I, like many on the Leave side, celebrated, just almost 10 years ago now.
I know. We're there, almost there.
Well, then we faced years, didn't we, of this undemocratic, anti-democratic opposition. They would do anything. And therefore, I think we must expect the same. And I think this time Reform are thinking very seriously about that and are working through how to write law which cannot be challenged and how to defeat these anti-democratic forces in the wider state, which will seek to oppose what needs to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I also ask you about another pledge from Reform? The pledge to increase taxes. It was announced yesterday by Robert Jenrick, the party's economic spokesman. not their shadow Treasury Minister, we have to say, shadow Chancellor. They're pledging to increase taxes for businesses that employ foreign workers. Basically, that rise in national insurance for employers that came up in the 2024 budget. Basically, they're going to keep it for foreign workers, but reduce it for British employed workers to basically disincentivise companies from employing those from abroad. I mean, seems pretty legitimate to me. Seems like a jolly good idea. If these people are desperately needed and they cannot find someone, they'll have to pay that extra cost. But if they've got a choice between a British worker and a foreign worker, it will be cheaper to employ the British worker. That's got to be a good thing for British people, surely.
Yeah, but I think some of my good friends on the right would argue we should just have simpler taxes across the board. But actually,
to that.
Really, yeah, but I think there's a really important benefit in making it harder and more expensive to employ foreign nationals. Actually, another part of this is the visa changes which were brought in under Boris, where they simplified the visa sponsorship system. It's actually been a huge driver of the Boris way. They used to be really expensive and time-consuming and annoying to sponsor visas, and those barriers are actually important because we've got an incredibly high level of youth unemployment in this country. If we want to bring that down, we have to make it more appealing and easier for companies to employ young Brits than to import labour from elsewhere.
Which is what they are doing. And again, a lot of people say, the argument's been this economic benefit and we're bringing over the brightest and the best. No, I'm sorry, the vast majority of people who are coming are either dependents or they are low-skilled, low-wage workers who don't make a net contribution.
Yeah, and most of the people who come on this skilled worker visa are not significant contributors either. The contribution is very concentrated in about the top 20 or 30% of earners who come here with a skilled worker visa. So even in the notionally skilled category, most of them aren't net contributors.
And even then, by the way, we're importing, doctors from countries like Nigeria where they've got a shortage of doctors. Massive shortage of doctors affecting healthcare there, and we're bringing them in here when we've got plenty of youngsters who are perfectly capable, got the A grades to train to be doctors in this country. It's just extraordinary. David Shipley, investigative journalist, always good to talk to you. You cover a lot of ground there. Thank you very much. Tom Slater, the person sneezing just then.
Apologies. You didn't say bless you.
I don't like the bless you thing, but there we are. What do you make of these policies?
Well, I think it's just so striking how much the political debate has moved, in terms of on the right of British politics, obviously, but even Labour having to make some kinds of amends on indefinite leave to remain and what have you, and the time at which people claim asylum.
We're streeting, talking about people should fly their union flags with pride today.
So whilst people might feel frustrated at the pace of change where migration is concerned, the debate is immeasurably different to where it was even a few years ago. And I think this is a sign that on this issue, more than any other in British politics, politicians of the right, but also even the existing political establishment being dragged kicking and screaming towards a different kind of position.
The lies that we've been told, the economic benefits, the social condition, it's been exposed. It's as simple as that. Now, listen, the Makerfield by-election has been mentioned. You know what I've got to do now? Put the kettle on. Pop to the loo.
Take a deep breath, Julie. It's going to take some time.
Deep breath. We're going to have a quick drink of water. Here we go. The candidates in the Makerfield by-election on Thursday, which we can't talk about on Thursday. Yes. As follows. Jake Austin, Liberal Democrats, Count Benfey's party, Andy Burnham, the Labour Party, Dan Clark, the Libertarian Party, John Dyer, Independent, Ed Gemmell, Climate Party, Paul Gould, Independent, Alan Howling, Lord Hope, the official Monster Raving Losing Party, Robert Kenyon, Reform UK, Robert Pownell, Protect the Wild, Rebecca Shepherd, Restore Britain, Sarah Wakefield, Green Party, Peter Wood, Rejoin EU, Michael Winstanley, the Conservative Party. We're done. Right, we're going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to talk to the wonderful, brilliant historian Martin Whittock about yet more lies about Winston Churchill. How many slurs are going to be thrown up? Basically, one is undoubtedly one of the greatest Britons ever to have lived. And the reason why we're able to have a row about whether or not we should have social media bans for under 16-year-olds in this country right now. And, and we're speaking English. But no, apparently he was just a horrible racist who basically deliberately starved Indians. That, according to a biographer for Churchill, is simply not true. So why is the National Portrait Gallery claiming it is? That's up next. This is Talk.
breaking news.
Violence on the streets, there's no excuse for that. And if there are protests following this, I just hope that they remain non-violent. I mean, you can understand the community concerns after an attack like that.
People were saying all around the world, that's what British people now think. Have a listen to Rob from yesterday.
Morning, Jez. Well, yes, rightly, you shouldn't condone what happened. What else have people got to do? The political class are not listening. These people who are coming over here illegally, they're rapists, terrorists. They're coming over here. It's literally like putting a wall in a sheep field.
We've got some...
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:51 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tom Slater's still with me as well. Tom, just checking, Winston Churchill, racist, not a racist, good thing, bad thing?
I mean, the fact that we're even having this argument is slightly ridiculous.
It's such a ridiculous question.
Well, this is it. I think it just shows to this desperation to kind of moralise about history. And to also, I think if this was coming from a reasonable reassessment of a particular historical figure, even one of great significance to which we owe an awful lot, that would be one thing. I don't think that's what's driving this constant reappraisal of Churchill. I think it is just about national self-loathing and the desire to paint everything in history, even what was supposed to be, well, you know, our greatest hour standing against fascism, as also kind of corrupted and stained. That's what I think all of this is about.
Absolutely. Well, look, we've got a Winston Churchill in the National Portrait Gallery. The National Portrait Gallery has claimed in an artwork that the wartime Prime Minister deliberately starved Indians. He inflicted mass starvation on India, willfully is the word they used, during the Bengal famine of 1943. This, of course, is a taxpayer-funded institution overlooking Trafalgar Square. It's a 40-minute film by an artist called Helen Kamak, whose voiceover narration claims the leader used mass starvation as a weapon of war. Well, a biographer of Winston Churchill, Lord Roberts of Belgravia, has written a letter signed by another 50 peers as well, including Churchill's grandson, Lord Soames, describing the film as an ideologically motivated rant and saying it's also historically ludicrous and those claims are foul and vile. Well, let's talk about this with historian and commentator Martin Whittock. Good afternoon to you, Martin.
Good afternoon.
Explain for those of us who went to the sort of schools where no one taught us anything, let alone about these sort of details, what happened in the Bengal famine of 1943 and why would anyone make a claim that the starvation of people there was deliberate by our Prime Minister?
OK, the Bengal famine, as you said, took place in 1943, Bengal in India, and an estimated up to 3 million people died there. Huge numbers. Wavell, the Viceroy to India, described the Bengal famine as one of the biggest disasters ever before any people under British rule. He said it caused huge damage to the empire's reputation. The question is, why did it happen and how did the government respond? And those are the two key questions. So the first thing is the causes. The causes of the famine were out of government hands. There'd been a devastating cyclone, there'd been rice crop diseases, and the Japanese occupation of Burma, of course, to the east, had cut off crucial grain supplies. Tackling it was made very difficult by shipping shortages and the dangers of Japanese submarines in the Bay of Bengal.
Yeah, bearing in mind this is the middle of the war.
Yes. Yeah. And of course, war demands occupied huge amounts of government energy. But it is undeniable that government decisions seem to have made things worse. Exports still happened from India during the famine. The government did ignore pleas from British officials in India, and it just didn't give it the kind of attention it might have deserved. Yeah. It's not helped by the fact that, for example, during one government discussion about the famine, Secretary of State Leopold Amery recorded that Churchill suggested any aid sent would be insufficient because, quote unquote, Indians breed like rabbits. Now, clearly that was extremely unhelpful and is shocking. Most historians nowadays see, as a balanced view, see the Bengal famine as a mixture of tragic circumstances beyond the government controls, but also negligence and lack of focus. And my soundbite would be that while the crisis of war clearly added to the situation, there was lethal indifference and negligence. There was not murderous intent.
There's a difference between something when literally fighting for the survival of your country, dealing with a world war, where unfortunately this was not a top priority. Now, we can argue that it should have been among the top priorities, but it wasn't. I think in those circumstances, understandable, but that's very, very different. It doesn't excuse it, but very, very different from deliberately going, I don't care, or deliberately orchestrated the famine, which is clearly not what happened, and deliberately go, no, let's make sure that 3 million people die unnecessarily.
Yeah, and that's clearly extremely unhelpful. And these kind of complicated debates are not helped by those kind of extreme statements. It should be noted, though, in late 1943, Churchill did appoint Field Marshal Wavell as Viceroy of India, and by utilising the military and distributing supplies, the famine was ended. But that does raise the question whether it could have been averted if more concern and energy shown earlier.
But this is very different from, say, what happened in Ukraine and the mass starvation of many millions more than that. I think it was 14 million in Ukraine, where it was a deliberate policy. They confiscated grain from Russia. They quite deliberately orchestrated a famine to kill people, to kill off any chance of an uprising against the Soviet Union. I mean, that's very, very different. That was deliberate mass murder. But this isn't the first time that Churchill has been maligned. And again, a lot of these conversations always ignore context. They ignore historical context. They ignore, the wartime context, priorities. And often we see when we have criticism of some of our, former, greatest Britons, I think everyone would agree he's one of our greatest Britons. Anyone who got a clue what they're talking about in terms of saving us in the Second World War is that, and indeed Western civilization, I would argue, but they're actually, trying to judge someone by the standards of today.
And you're quite right to say this is very, very different to the Holodomor, as it's sometimes described, which was the death by starvation that happened in Ukraine in the early 1930s. That was deliberate policy done in order to do that and to achieve that. And it achieved that appallingly. This was not deliberate policy. And I think what this challenges, though, is when we look at our people like Churchill, heroic hero, war leader, we have to recognise that doesn't make somebody perfect. And there are times when they make terrible mistakes, and we're right to say that was a terrible mistake, that was a bad attitude, but that does not itself take away from the other things they achieved as well. What we need to deal with not caricatures, but complex people from the past, recognising the good things and the bad things, and having open debates and not reducing it to sound bites. And these kind of statements of deliberate starvation to punish the Indians, I do not think is at all helpful in facing up to big mistakes that were made, including by Churchill, and attitudes that were wrong. But we need frank and open debate, not these kinds of polarised debates.
Absolutely. Martin Whittock, absolutely fantastically put, historian commentator there, Martin Whittock. Tom said, this is the thing, this all started with the whole, Winston Churchill was racist. Again, always constantly judging everybody by the views that apparently we all have to hold, 10 minutes ago, difficult to keep up, but judging everything by, in America the same, this whole, a former president is written off, a hero of the revolution written off because they owned slaves. Well, yeah, everyone did then,
No, exactly. It's just a recipe for having no heroes whatsoever, or none that were around any longer than 10 minutes ago.
Well, none that were white and Western.
That as well. I mean, it's ridiculous. And this moralising
have they heard about what happened with Gandhi? I mean, really?
And also what's happening in the world all over the shop, even at the moment. There's complexity throughout history, and the refusal to hold to that, I think, just speaks to that this is just a political thing dressed up as a discussion about history.
I think everyone's just had enough of this whole the attacks on... I mean, we don't have to deify somebody to be realistic about them, but this non-stop attacks